Torah portion, re'eh. Okay, it's not re'eh, the way that you pronounce it. You've got that first letter, Hebrew read from right to left. First letter is like a backwards R, and it makes an R sound. And you've got the vowel sound, which follows it afterwards. Looks like a colon. Now, if you think of it as a colon, that will probably serve you well. It's just r, separates the rest of the word. And you've got an aleph, that takes on the sound of the vowel, which is an A sound. And then you've got a hey at the end, which is pretty much a silent letter in this. So it's re-a is how you say that. And what struck me with this Torah portion as I went through it this time is that the entire Torah portion is actually all about the spiritual mincha offering from the very beginning of it to the end. All of it is involved with the mincha offering. So that's the perspective from which I'm going to look at this. If we go into it in Deuteronomy 11:26, it starts off with quite a profound statement that is one of those ones that can just kind of pass you by because you hear things like it so often. Where it says, "See, I am setting before you a blessing and a curse. The blessing when you obey the commands of Yehovah your Elohim, which I commanded you today. The curse when you do not obey the commands of Yehovah your Elohim, but turn aside from the way which I command you today, to go after other gods, which you have not known." And a couple of weeks ago, we looked at what these other gods can look like, both in the lives of people in the past and in our lives now. You'll notice that there's two groups of people, again, that are being addressed here. Okay, so you're going into the land. You'll receive the blessing when you obey, and you'll receive the curse when you do not obey. There's two different groups of people who are being addressed in everything that Moshe says. There's the people who obey and receive the blessings, and they go in and they're told, you have cherished to do the commands, and you have done this, and you have done that. And then there's those who do not obey. And the same is true for us as well. When we read these words, we're going to be divided up into two groups of people, those who obey and those who disobey. Hopefully we'll all be the ones who obey. Verse 29 says, "And it has been when Yehovah your Elohim has brought you into the land which you go to possess, that you have given the blessing on Mount Gerizim and the curse on Mount Ebal." And we'll have to wait until we get into the book of Joshua to see these events happening. But again, it's written in this future perfect tense. It has been. You have put the blessings and the curses on the people on Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. "Are they not beyond the Jordan toward the setting sun, in the land of the Canaanites who dwell in the desert plain opposite Gilgal?" So it's all kind of prophetically spoken. When you've entered into the land, you have done these things. Are they not beyond the Jordan that you've not crossed over? But when you've entered into the land, you have done these things. "Beside the terebinth trees of Moreh, for you are passing over the Jordan to go in to possess the land which Yehovah your Elohim is giving you, and you have possessed it, and you have dwelt in it, and have cherished to do all the laws and judgments which I am setting before you today." So hopefully this is something which is spoken to all of us here. Okay, you have entered into the land. You have cherished to do all the laws and judgments. But obviously we all have free will. We might well be of those people who it is said, the curse will come upon you when you disobey. Okay. Deuteronomy 12 starts and says, "These are the laws and judgments which you cherish to do in the land which Yehovah Elohim of your fathers is giving you to possess all the days that you live on the soil. Completely destroy all the places where the nations which you are dispossessing serve their gods, on the high mountains and on the hills and under every green tree. And you have broken down their altars and smashed their pillars, burned their asherim with fire. You have cut down the carved images of their gods and have destroyed their name out of that place." Okay, so the worship of all of those gods is concerned with what is the name of that God. If you're worshipping the God of fire, For example, you're going to worship him according to his name. Maybe you need sacrifices by fire or whatever it is. So you destroy their name, the name of those foreign gods out of that place. Do not do so to Yehovah your Elohim. Seek the place where Yehovah your Elohim chooses out of all your tribes to put his name there for his dwelling place, and there you have entered. So we know where that place is, having the benefit of being in the future. It was Jerusalem in the tribe of Yehudah. Okay, so they're to go to the place where he's chosen to put his name. And obviously this is talking about the physical, earthly tabernacle. We know that the earthly tabernacle was patterned after the heavenly one, and us as a temple of the Ruach, we are in the same sort of way patterned after the heavenly tabernacle. So there's the earthly tabernacle, which is the one that's being discussed here. There's the heavenly tabernacle, and then there's us individually. We have the Spirit inside of us. We are the temple of the Ruach, but as a body, we make up the body of Mashiach, and corporately, all of us together make up a temple of the Ruach too. And I think sometimes people confuse these things and they think, well, now we offer spiritual sacrifices. So that's changed from the past. The Israelites in the past did not offer spiritual sacrifices, but that's not actually true. Okay, all of the commands require you to give one or more of the spiritual sacrifices. Every single one of those commands that they were to follow required spiritual sacrifices. So they had an earthly tabernacle. They themselves offered spiritual sacrifices, and we know that they had the Spirit in them as well, contrary to your more traditional Christian teaching. They didn't have Yeshua serving in the heavenly tabernacle at that time. At this point in time, we have Yeshua serving in the heavenly tabernacle for the cleansing of the conscience, and we have us offering spiritual sacrifices. We do not have a temple where we can cleanse the flesh at the moment, though. Okay, so Yeshua for us, he's serving in the heavenly tabernacle. It will be good for us if we had an earthly tabernacle where the physical presence of Yehovah dwelt, where we could go and be clean before him and enter in and offer sacrifice and draw close to Elohim's physical presence. One day, he will dwell physically on the earth with us. But at the moment, we've got the more important tabernacle after which the earthly one was patterned. We don't have the earthly tabernacle because in 70 AD, it was sacked. All of the holy from inside of it was taken. And we no longer have a place which is where he can physically dwell and be among his people. But we do have us corporately. We are the body of Messiah. We are the temple of the Ruach, and each one of us has the Spirit dwelling inside of us, so we can all offer those spiritual sacrifices. But as I say, offering those spiritual sacrifices was something that if they were to follow the Torah, they would have been doing as well. Leviticus 19:17-18 says, "Do not hate your brother in your heart. Reprove your neighbor for certain and bear no sin because of him. Do not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the children of your people, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am Yehovah." So this command is a great example of them offering the shlemim sacrifice. Okay, so we had the burnt offering, which for us spiritually is us offering all of ourselves to Yehovah. It is submission to him. We have the spiritual mincha offering, which is when you use your material goods in the way that is mandated by Yehovah. Okay, then there was the peace offering, which for us is making peace one with another. So they were doing the same thing when they followed this command. They were making peace with one another, so it required them to make that spiritual sacrifice. All of the commands, if you're in transgression of them, would require you to make an asham offering, which is the guilt offering, and the sin offering, which for us is repentance. So for every command, if you're in transgression of it, then you make that spiritual offering. You make the spiritual guilt offering, which is confession of guilt, and then you make the spiritual sin offering, the spiritual chata'at, which is repentance. So every single one of the commands requires a spiritual sacrifice to be made. All of the physical sacrifices required a spiritual sacrifice to be made as well. And this is another example of a spiritual shlomim offering. When a man gives to his neighbor a donkey or ox or sheep or any beast to watch over, and it dies or is injured or is driven away while no one is looking, let an oath of Yehovah be between them both, that he has not put his hand into his neighbor's goods, and the owner of it shall accept that. So that's true for us as well as it was for them. But as we're making the spiritual sacrifice, we're making peace with one another by these means. They would have done the same thing. The spiritual sacrifices are not new in the New Covenant writings. They were all of the way through the Tanakh. They're just written about more explicitly in the New Covenant writings. Exodus 28:10 says, remember the Sabbath day to set it apart. 6 days you labor and shall do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of Yehovah, your Elohim. So depending on who you are, when you hear this command, it's going to require of you different spiritual sacrifices to follow it. If you're somebody who's been going to church on a Sunday for years, when you realize it's actually the seventh day that's the Sabbath, that's going to require of you an Asham offering, and it's going to require of you a sin offering in order for you to come in line with it. It might require of you to make a mincha offering, because maybe it costs you something to not work on the Sabbath. Maybe it's going to reduce your wages, it's going to reduce your pay. So that is to make a mincha offering to Yehovah. Of course, for anyone, it's going to require making an olah offering. It's going to require that submission to completely rest and to stop from working for a day. So to do these commands requires the spiritual sacrifices. Deuteronomy 12 continues and says, and there you have taken your burnt offerings, your offerings, the word there is zavach, it's sacrifices, your tithes, your ma'aseh, that is a word that means tenth. It doesn't mean tithe as we have in English, it just means your tenths. The contributions of your hand, that word is terumah, when we are looking at the word room, which means to lift up. A terumah is something that is lifted up to Yehovah. So an offering or a contribution of your hand. Your vowed offerings, when you vow something, you nadar it. So a vowed offering is called the neder, related to the word. Your voluntary offerings, your nedavah, and the firstlings of your herd and of your flock. So whatever it is, all of these things here, all of these require you to make a mincha offering. Whether it's bringing of your animals, it's bringing your tithes, whether it's bringing just other things that you lift up to Yehovah, things that you vowed or things that you voluntarily bring to him, all of them are mincha offerings on the spiritual level. And there you have eaten before Yehovah your Elohim and have rejoiced in all that you put your hand to, you and your households in which Yehovah our Elohim has blessed you. Do not do as we are doing here today, each one doing whatever is right in his own eyes, because you have not yet entered the rest and the inheritance which Yehovah your Elohim is giving you. And of course that's true for us as well. We've not entered into the rest and the inheritance that we are promised, but we're not to do each one as we think is right in our eyes. We are to give what Yehovah asks us to give, to do with those things which he has blessed us with, what he tells us to do. Another example, of course, of the mincha offering would be to give to the poor, to give to the widow, to give to the orphan, or whatever that looks like. Anything that he asks you to do with your stuff, that is a spiritual mincha offering. Genesis 4, 1-4. It's interesting when you read the Hebrew words behind this. It says, Adam knew Chava, his wife, Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain. and said, I have gained a man from Yehovah. And again she gave birth to his brother Havel. Havel became a keeper of sheep. Cain became a tiller of the ground. So for someone who keeps sheep and someone who tills the ground, what do you think is easier for each one of those people to bring as a mincha offering before Yehovah? Okay, if you till the ground, it's going to be easier for you to bring something which is the fruit of the ground. If you are a tiller of a keeper of sheep, it's going to be easier for you to bring sheep. But it doesn't matter what's easier for us to bring. It matters what Yehovah asks us to bring. So it says, it came to be in the course of time that Cain brought an offering. It doesn't say an offering. It says Cain brought a mincha of the fruit of the ground to Yehovah. Havel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat. And Yehovah looked to Havel and his mincha rather than Cain. Cain was obviously upset about this. Yehovah says to him, if you do well, then it's well to you. I can't remember the exact quote, but he says, why is your face fallen? Why are you wroth? If you do well, it's good for you. If not, it is sin for you. And sin's desire is towards you, but you should master it. Okay, so Cain brought an offering of what was abundantly available to him. And it was a mincha, in the same way that we would bring a mincha. But because he doesn't do it according to what is pleasing to Yehovah, Yehovah was wroth with him and counted it as sin towards him. Proverbs 3:9-10 says, esteem Yehovah with your goods and with the first fruits of all your increase. Then your storehouses shall be filled with plenty, and your vats overflow with new wine. See, the way people like Cain are, when they want to bring an offering which is easier for them to bring, they misunderstand this. And people who don't do those things which qualify as mincha offerings misunderstand this. They think that by esteeming Yehovah with their goods, they're going to actually have less. Whereas that's not what Scripture says. It shows a disbelief of the word. Disobedience is disbelief anyway, but it shows a basic misunderstanding and a disbelief of the word to not think, if I esteem Yehovah with my goods, then I will have more. He will bless me more abundantly. Numbers 18 verse 8 says, Yehovah spoke to Aharon, and see, I myself have also given you the charge of my contributions, my terumah, all the set apart of the children of Israel. I have given them to you for the anointing, and to your sons as a law forever. So much of what we heard of in Deuteronomy 12, much of that is actually to be given to Aharon and to his sons, which presents a problem for us. If we're going to bring the first fruits of our increase to Yehovah, how do we do that? Because we don't have priests. Now there are people who would say, well, the priests were Levites, so bring it to the Levites. We've got people who qualify as Levites today, but to me, that's not correct, okay? The priests are distinguished in Scripture. What was brought to the priests is distinguished in Scripture from what was brought to the Levites. Nehemiah 10:34-37 says, and we cast lots among the priests and the Levites and the people for bringing the wood offering into the house of our Elohim. Okay, so we don't generally tend to think of things like this. But in the tabernacle, the way that it was run, it needed certain things to run. You needed wood to burn on the altar. You needed oil to be given. You needed the showbread and the materials for the showbread to be provided. So people bringing things like that, they would be bringing a mincha. On a spiritual level, they'd be bringing a mincha to Yehovah. So they cast lots to see who is it that's going to bring this wood offering. According to our fathers' houses, at the appointed times, year by year, to burn on the altar of Yehovah, our Elohim, as it is written in the Torah. And to bring the first fruits of our soil and the first fruits of all fruit of our trees, year by year, to the house of Yehovah. Also to bring the firstborn of our sons and our livestock, as it is written in the Torah, the firstlings of our herds and our flocks to the house of our Elohim, to the priests attending in the house of our Elohim. So these were some of the things that were brought to the priests. And there are people today who look after livestock. Maybe none of us do, but there are people who look after livestock. There are people who tend crops who are going to have first fruits of those things. The Torah says you're to bring the first fruits. You're to bring your firstborn of your flock. You're also to redeem the firstborn of your children. Okay, so these things are to be brought to Yehovah, but as we can see, they were to be brought to the priests. And that we should bring the first fruits of our dough and our terumah and the fruit from all kinds of trees, of new wine, of oil, to the priests, to the storerooms of the house of our Elohim, and the tithes of our land to the Levites. So you see here how it draws that distinction. All these things are to be brought to the priests. The tithes are to be brought to the Levites. So how do we give to a priest? If it's not the Levites and it's distinct to the Levites, how do we actually do that today? Well, they were to be brought not just to priests, so if I can get that right, to Aharon and his sons. Aharon was the high priest, so it was to be brought to the high priest. Our high priest is Yeshua. Yeshua says in Matthew 25, verse 40, "The king shall answer and say to them, truly I say to you, insofar as you did it to one of the least of these my brothers, you did it to me." So if we want to know how to give to Yeshua and his sons, what we do is we give to the brethren. We give to our brothers and our sisters. Yeshua specifies here the least of the brethren. Okay, so if we give it to our poor brothers and sisters, then we are giving to the high priest and his sons. Okay, the word sons being something that can relate to just men and that can relate to a mixed group of people as well. So when we are to bring these offerings, anything that is to be given to the priests specifically, we give it to our brothers and sisters who are in need. Because otherwise we have a problem. These things are not due to the priests. The Torah doesn't say, you owe the priest this. What the Torah says is, you owe Yehovah this. Yehovah has blessed you with it. It is not yours. It is to be given to Yehovah. Yehovah then tells us, I have given these things to the priests. So we can't give them directly to Yehovah. He inhabits eternity. We do with it what he says to do. So give it to the priests. How do we do that today? Because we have to separate it because it's holy to Yehovah. We can't take it for ourselves. Who do we give it to? We have our answer here. Numbers 18, 9-13 further specifies, says, this is yours of the most set apart, the Holy of Holies, from the fire, all their offerings, all their grain offerings, all their sin offerings, all their guilt offerings, which they render to me, are most set apart for you and your sons. Again, Yeshua and his children, if you like. Eat it in the most set apart place. Every male eats it. It is set apart to you. This also is yours, the contribution of their gift with all the wave offerings of the children of Israel. I have given them to you and your sons and daughters with you as a law forever. Everyone who is clean in your house eats it. Okay, so that was talking about the high priest in the earthly tabernacle, where cleanliness is speaking of cleanliness of the flesh. So anyone who was clean could eat of that which was physically holy. Okay, when we're talking about things spiritually, we're talking about giving to Yeshua and to the brethren who are clean spiritually. So you wouldn't give it to somebody who was in sin in any way in their life. All the best of the oil and all the best of the new wine and the grain, their first fruits, which they give to Yehovah, I have given them to you. Again, they're not due to the priests, they're not due to Aaron, they're due to Yehovah. The first fruits of all that is in their land, which they bring to Yehovah, are yours. Everyone who is clean in your house eats it. I know there are people online who keep animals, who grow crops. If you do that, take the first fruits of those things and give them to your brothers and sisters. Even if that looks like going to a Christian church and giving it to those people who are not willfully in sin. Wouldn't go to a hyper grace church, but they're still our brethren. You can go and you can give it to them, maybe if they have poor there. But make sure that you separate these things because they're not ours. We can't say, oh, I had no one to give it to, so I didn't give it to anyone. It's Yehovah's. It's not for us to take for ourselves. Verse 10 says, but you have passed over the Jordan and have dwelt in the land which Yehovah your Elohim is giving you to inherit, and he has given you rest from all your enemies round about, and you have dwelt in safety. And it has been unto the place which Yehovah your Elohim chooses to make his name tabernacle there. There you bring all that I'm commanding you, your burnt offerings, your sacrifices, your tenths, the contributions of your hand, your terumah, what you lift up, or your choice offerings, your mivcha neder, as in the best of your offerings. What's happening there? It's getting gradually pulled off my head. Which you nadar to Yehovah. So that's where the vowed offerings gets its name, the neder. That's that which has been nadared. And you have rejoiced before Yehovah your Elohim, you and your sons and your daughters and your male servants and your female servants, and the Levite who is within your gates, since he has no portion nor inheritance with you. So all of these things were to be brought up to Jerusalem 3 times a year, to the place where Yehovah made his name to dwell, when the people would come up and they would rejoice before Yehovah. Guard yourself that you do not offer your burnt offerings in every place that you see, except in the place which Yehovah chooses in one of your tribes. There you offer your burnt offerings, and there you are to do all that I am commanding you. So physically, when they were making a physical burnt offering, they were to take it to the temple, and they couldn't do it anywhere else. If for us, we are giving submission to Yehovah when we give an Olah offering, and we're giving it in the temple of the Ruach, then we are not to give that submission to anything else. It is only to be offered in the temple of the Ruach, not to the other gods, which we looked at a couple of weeks ago. Only with all the desire of your soul you do slaughter and eat, according to the blessing of Yehovah your Elohim, which he has given you within all your gates. The unclean and the clean do eat of it, and of the gazelle and the deer alike. Okay, so what's being said here is, when you kill an animal, if you desire to kill and eat an animal, these are the protocol to follow when you're doing that. If you were doing it in the temple, an unclean person was not able to eat of that animal because they couldn't enter into the temple. When you're eating it within your gates and you're not taking that animal to the temple to be a sacrifice, you kill the animal, and you'll see you have to drain the blood from the animal. You can't eat the blood of the animal. The unclean and the clean do eat of it alike, though. So you don't have to be in a physically clean state. Why? Because you're not going into the temple, which is where cleanness and uncleanness would have an effect. So if you kill an animal to eat outside, the clean or the unclean can eat of it, not in the temple. Only the blood you do not eat, pour it on the earth like water. And we've seen before how we have reclassified what blood is. We classify the myoglobin in the meat as blood, presumably because it's red. And we've reclassified what fat is as well. What fat and what blood are in the scriptures are different. Fat is the visceral fat, that which is around your organs. That's why the Bible specifies it's around the kidneys and around the liver. That fat is to be offered to Yehovah. What we would call fat in a piece of meat is just part of the meat. What we would call blood in that piece of meat is just part of the meat. And scientifically, they are different one from another as well. So you're not to eat the blood. That doesn't mean you can't have a rare steak. It just means you can't drink the blood that is going around the veins and arteries of the animal. Pour it on the earth as water. And that's the same as in the temple. They're being told basically, do this in the temple. If you're going to kill an animal outside of the temple, you need to not eat the blood, just like it was being offered in the temple. But it's different because the unclean and the clean can both eat of it. So a distinction is being drawn there between what happens in the temple, where everyone has to be clean, and what happens outside. Some of the rules are the same, some of them are different. You are not allowed to eat within your gates the tithe of your grain, or of your new wine, or of your oil, or of the firstlings of your herd, or of your flock, or of any of the offerings which you vow, or of your voluntary offerings, or of the heave offering of your hand. That's the tenufa. That's different. That's what you noof. That's what you wave. Okay, so none of these things are we allowed to partake of ourselves. Why? Obviously, they're not ours to have. They're Yehovah's. So we are to give them to the person that Yehovah says. For us, as we've seen, the majority of these things are given to the brethren, the poorer of the brethren. The tithe is given to the Levites. But eat them before Yehovah your Elohim in the place which Yehovah your Elohim chooses, you and your son and your daughter, your male servant, your female servant, and the Levite who is within your gates. And you have rejoiced before Yehovah your Elohim in all that you put your hands to. Okay, again, this rejoicing is what is written of happening at these 3 times that they would go up to Jerusalem. Guard yourself that you do not forsake the Levite as long as you live in your land. And that's something that you'll read time and again throughout the Torah. And as we'll see, that's something that actually they ended up not doing. The things that are emphasized in the Torah actually end up being the thing that Israel went astray from. When Yehovah your Elohim enlarges your borders, he has promised you, and you have said, let me eat meat, for your soul desires to eat meat. All the desire of your soul, you do eat flesh. When the place where Yehovah your Elohim chooses to put his name is too far from you, then you have slaughtered from your herd, from your flock, which Yehovah has given you, as I've commanded you, and you have eaten within your gates of all the desire of your soul. Only as the gazelle and deer are eaten, so you are to eat of it. The unclean and the clean alike eat of it. So what this is saying is, usually you'd want to take something like that to the temple, so that those things which are holy could be given to Yehovah. But if the temple's ages away from you and taking your dinner there isn't practicable, then what you do is you kill of it. The rules are slightly different. Unclean and the clean can both eat of that thing. Only be firm not to eat the blood. Where there's chazak, it's be strong not to eat the blood. For the soul is in the blood. Do not eat the soul with the meat. Do not eat it, you pour it on the earth like water. Do not eat it, that it might be well with you and your children after you, when you do what is right in the eyes of Yehovah. Okay, so what we can see from that passage of scripture that was on the previous slide, that continues onto this slide, is that it is right with Yehovah to eat meat. It is just not right with Yehovah to eat the blood. If you do that, you are doing what is right with Yehovah. Paul points out that the 5th commandment, to honor your father and your mother, is the first charge that we are given with a promise. This is another charge that we are given with a promise. Do not eat it, the blood, that it might be well with you and your children. And these things are dotted around throughout the Torah as well. Only the set apart which you have and your vowed offerings you are to take up and have gone to the place which Yehovah chooses. And you have made your burnt offerings, the meat and the blood, on the altar of Yehovah your Elohim, and the blood of your offerings is poured out on the altar of Yehovah your Elohim, and you eat the meat. So that's what they would do. Some of the meat went to the priest, some of the meat they actually ate of. Cherish and obey all these words which I command you, that it might be well with you and your children after you forever. Again, this promise that we're given. When you do what is good and right in the eyes of Yehovah your Elohim. When Yehovah your Elohim does cut off from before you the nations which you go to dispossess, and you dispossess them and dwell in their land, guard yourself that you are not ensnared to follow them. After they are destroyed from before you, that you do not inquire about their gods, saying, how did these nations serve their gods? Let me do so too. Do not do so to Yehovah your Elohim, for every abomination which Yehovah hates, they have done to their gods, for they even burn their sons and daughters in the fire to their gods. So destroy the name of these gods from these places. This is how you bring the offerings. When you go into the land, don't be ensnared. It says to guard yourself, to shamar yourself, keep yourself from these things, because we are ensnared by these things. We're ensnared by spiritual practices that perhaps seem more appealing to us, that are maybe more familiar to us, and they do ensnare us. So we have to guard ourselves against these things, particularly not to do them in worship of Yehovah, because that's taking the name of another God and worshipping Yehovah thereby. Now, Deuteronomy 12:32 is sometimes Deuteronomy 13 verse 1. I think that the Jews have it as Deuteronomy 13 verse 1. I would say that that is actually the way that it should be. All the words I am commanding you, cherish to do it, do not add to it, nor take away from it. Okay, so does that come after don't worship Yehovah like that? Could do. Or does it come before this? When there arises among you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and he shall give you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or the wonder shall come true of which he has spoken to you, saying, let us go after other gods which you have not known and serve them. Do not listen to the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams, for Yehovah your Elohim is trying you to know whether you love Yehovah your Elohim with all your heart and with all your soul. I would say it comes before that. Don't add to the words. Don't take away from it. Cherish to do them. If someone comes along and they're telling you to do it slightly differently, don't listen to them, because that would be adding to or taking away from it. If that happens to you, and someone comes along and they're suggesting something, really it sounds like worshipping the God of the Bible, but it's slightly different from the scriptures. Yehovah is testing you to see whether or not you love him or whether you love something else. Maybe you like this other idea of, oh, we can do it slightly differently. We do everything else apart from that, or we do that, but we do it slightly differently, whatever it is. Yehovah is testing you, and he tells you in his word that he's testing you. So guard yourself against those things. Walk after Yehovah your Elohim and fear him. Cherish his commands, obey his voice, serve him, and cling to him. We're told many times, do not be led astray. Cling to Yehovah. Guard yourself. All of these things should be telling us that it's going to be an enticement to leave Yehovah, and also that these things are tests to see whether we will or whether we will love him and cling to him. And that prophet or that dreamer of dreams is put to death because he has spoken apostasy against Yehovah. That's what people who come and they're telling you very slightly different thing to what the scriptures say are doing. They're speaking apostasy against Yehovah, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, redeemed you from the house of bondage to make you stray from the way in which Yehovah your Elohim commanded you to walk. And you have put away the evil from your midst. Okay, so they're trying to make you stray from the way he's commanded you. The only way that we have to test any of these things is by the word. Does it match up 100% to the word? Or is it adding to or taking away from the word? When your brother, the son of your mother, or the son or your son or your daughter, or the wife of your bosom, or your friend who is as your own soul, entices you secretly, saying, let us go and serve other gods, which you have not known, neither you nor your father. The gods of the people who are all around you, near to you or far off from you, from one end of the earth to the other end of the earth, do not agree with him or listen to him, nor does your eye pardon him, nor spare him or conceal him. So it doesn't matter if it's your husband. You don't say, oh, I love my husband. Surely Yehovah wants me to follow my husband, which is true. So when my husband is telling me this thing to go slightly astray from the word and to do it, I'm going to follow after my husband instead. Or my wife, or my best friend, anyone who is dear to you, anyone. You do not let your eye pardon them, you don't spare them, and you don't conceal them from it if they're trying to get you to go astray. Be a good idea to speak to such a person and to ask them to repent and show them what the word says, certainly. But if they're doing that, don't take pity on them. Don't think, oh no, it's them though. It's that person that's so dear to me. It's my husband or it's my wife. I'm going to go after my husband because my husband, surely Yehovah wants me to get on well with my husband. Doesn't he say love your neighbor? Surely not loving of my neighbor to have them stoned to death. Yehovah says, you do certainly kill him. Yehovah's perspective is obviously different to ours. And we can go astray by twisting parts of the word and not taking the whole word as context and saying, no, it's said. If someone comes and tells you to do these things, Yehovah is testing you. Do not go astray after that person. Your hand is first against him to put him to death, and afterward the hand of all the people. And you have stoned him with stones, and he has died, for he has sought to entice you away from Yehovah, your Elohim. They might come to you saying, we need to follow Yehovah by doing this. And that is different to the word. That's leading you astray from Yehovah, because Yehovah isn't anyone that someone calls Yehovah. Yehovah is very definite and very precise in who he is. Do not add to the word. Do not take away from the word. Let all Yisrael hear and fear, and not again do any such evil matter as this in your midst. So Yehovah doesn't pander to these people. He doesn't say, oh, have a soft touch with these people because they're very dear to you and you're to be loving to people. He says, do not have that attitude of mind. We ought to have Yehovah's attitude in these things. Similarly, Deuteronomy 7:26 says, do not bring an abomination into your house, lest you be accursed like it. Utterly loathe it, utterly hate it, for it is accursed. We're not to take these things which are abominations. Verse 12 of Deuteronomy 13 says, when you hear someone in one of your cities, which Yehovah your Elohim gives you to dwell in, saying, some men, sons of Belial, have gone out from your midst and led the inhabitants of their city astray, saying, let us go and serve other gods, gods whom you have not known, and you have inquired and searched out and asked diligently, and lo, truth, the thing is established that this abomination has been done in your midst. What were we told? Do not bring an abomination into your house. Utterly loathe it, utterly hate it. So if you know that this abomination has been done in your midst, You do certainly smite the inhabitants of that city with the edge of the sword, putting it under the ban and all that is in it. Obviously, we're not going to go up and take arms against fellow members of Israel who start trying to make you go astray from Yehovah, because that would be murder. We don't have judges to rule on such a matter. However, we are given an attitude of mind that we're to have towards it. We're not to tolerate it. We're not to say, oh, it's okay. It's them and they're really dear to us. We are not to tolerate it. Our eyes not to pardon or to pity these people. It's livestock with the edge of the sword. You do gather all its plunder into the middle of the street, completely burn with fire the city and its plunder before Yehovah your Elohim, and it has been a heap forever, never to be built again. There does not cleave to your hand that which is put under the ban, so that Yehovah turns from the fierceness of his displeasure and has shown you compassion, loved you, and increased you, and he has sworn to your fathers. These things are to be incredibly important to us as they are to Yehovah. To Yehovah's perspective, if people are trying to lead you astray from following him, they are entailing death upon you, spiritual death, the second death upon you. So when he sees these things happening, he doesn't think, oh, it's okay, just let it go on, it'll be fine. As we might think, we're to guard ourselves, to have these attitudes of mind towards these things that Yehovah specifically tells us. When these things happen among you, guard yourself so that you have this attitude of mind. Again, Deuteronomy 13 and Deuteronomy 14, the boundary between them is blurred in my eyes. This isn't something that the Jews change or any translation I've seen has changed. But to me, those commands that we've just read are separate to this, and this should have what comes after it to follow on. It says, when you obey the voice of Yehovah your Elohim, to cherish all his commands, which I command you today, to do what is right in the eyes of Yehovah your Elohim, sons you are to Yehovah your Elohim. Do not cut yourselves, nor shave the front of your head for the dead. The reason I think that should follow on from it is the first time that these laws were given in Leviticus 19 to tell us how to be Kedoshim, holy ones to Yehovah. They were telling us how to be his sons, how to be holy to him. And here, the second time that it's given, to me, it's preceded by, when you've done these things, you've obeyed him, you've done what's right, you are his sons. Do not cut yourselves, nor shave the front of your head for the dead. You are a set-apart people to Yehovah your Elohim. Yehovah has chosen you to be a people for himself, a treasured possession above all the peoples who are on the face of the earth. To me, that's one cogent, coherent thought. Comes from a second retelling of this law. Leviticus 19:27-28 says, do not round the corner of your head, nor destroy the corner of your beard. Do not make cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor put tattoo marks upon you. I am Yehovah. That's what the English translation has. Okay, so you get people who are stunning and brave and have Leviticus 19:28 tattoos. They will be very upset to know that that's not actually what this says. Okay, these are all things which are for the dead. Okay, it doesn't say tattoo marks for the dead are forbidden. It says, do not round the corner of your head, destroy the corner of your beard, do not make cuttings in your flesh for the dead. And those three things are seen throughout Scripture as mourning practices. We never see anyone putting a tattoo mark on them. Now, that wouldn't matter if it's actually what this commandment said. Okay, but it's something that supports what I'm going to show you, that those words are not in the passage. Jeremiah 16:5-6. For thus said Yehovah, do not enter the house of mourning, neither go to lament or mourn for them, for I have withdrawn my peace from this people. Again, that attitude of mind that we were looking at. Declares Yehovah, even the kindness and the compassions Yehovah has withdrawn from them. Both great and small shall die in this land, so don't mourn or lament for them. They shall not be buried. No one shall lament for them, or cut themselves, or make themselves bald. These were mourning practices which were forbidden by the Torah. Came to be on the second day after he had killed Gedaliah, when no one yet knew it, that men came from Shechem, from Shiloh, and from Shomeron, 80 men with their beards shaved, their garments torn, having cut themselves. We see this tearing of garments being something that people do in mourning as well. But their beards are shaved and they've cut themselves, okay, as a mourning practice. All the oarsmen, the mariners, all the sailors of the sea shall come down from their ships. They shall stand on the shore, and they shall raise their voice and cry bitterly over you, cast dust on their heads, rolling themselves in ashes. Okay, so this is all about mourning. They shall shave themselves bald because of you, and shall gird themselves with sackcloth and ashes, mourning. Shave themselves bald. They shall weep for you with bitterness of heart and with bitter wailing. So throughout the rest of the scriptures, we see that these things are in practice mourning rituals. It shall be in that day, declares the Master Yehovah, that I shall cause the sun to go down at noon, and shall darken the earth on a day of brightness, and shall turn your festivals into mourning, all your songs into lamentation, bringing sackcloth on all loins, baldness on every head, and shall make it like mourning for an only son. So this baldness on your head is a mourning ritual. Again, you'll notice in none of these has making tattoo marks on you been mentioned. Because of the day that shall come to ravage all the Philistines, to be cut off from Sor and Sidon, every helper that survives, for Yehovah is ravaging the Philistines, the remnant of the Isle of Kaftor. Boldness shall come upon Azar. Ashkelon shall be cut off with the remnant of the valley. Till when would you cut yourself? Shaving your beard, shaving your head, cutting yourself are all mourning practices. Make an end in Moab to him who offers in the high places burnt incense to his gods. So my heart sounds for Moab like flutes, and my heart sounds for the men of Ker Cherez like flutes. Therefore the wealth they made shall be gone. For every head is bald, every beard is clipped, cuts on all the hands. So you've got all three of them in that passage. So do not round the corner of your head, nor destroy the corner of your beard. These are mourning practices. Do not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor put tattoo marks on you. I am Yehovah. Okay. So now that we understand that those three are all mourning practices, now we can look at the Hebrew that's used to see what is said. Okay, so this is how it's rendered in the King James Version. This is, of course, Blue Letter Bible. This is Strong's. Strong's identifies Hebrew words that are used in the passage. These Hebrew words aren't actually in the right order, but the King James Version says, you shall not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor print any marks upon you. I am the Lord. And it says, Ketaveth, Seret, and then marks is Ka'aka. Those words aren't in the right order, and we'll see that. But let's see what the words mean. Natan means to give, to put, or to set. In this context, it's to make cuttings in your flesh. You could have it put cuttings in your flesh if you wanted to. Ketaveth, okay, it says in Strong's, impression, inscription, mark in the flesh, perhaps a tattoo. These are the thoughts of the people who wrote Strong's. Here in Strong's definitions, however, it says a letter or other mark branded on the skin, any mark. Okay, so this is talking about letters. It's from the word which means to write. It's from the verb which means to write. Seret means cut or an incision. Okay, an incision or a cutting. Ka'aka says here means an incision, imprintment, tattoo, or mark. An incision or gash is the definition, a mark. Okay, so ka'aka is an incision or a gash. This is all interpretation here. This is all Strong's interpretation. This word, we looked at the word natan, to give or to make. This is the modified version of the word which is used in this passage. It's titnu. It is the modified version of natan. We can see here when it's modified from natan, which is what that root is there, in the pa'al form, it means to give or to allow. Rather than to make, it's to allow something in this form. It's in the second person, masculine, plural. Here we've got another word which we need to use, we need to know because it's used in this passage. It's bachem. Now, we know that a bait means in. Okay, if you've got be something, it means in that thing. This is a form of the bait. It's a modified version of the bait. And it's the second person masculine plural, so it's not in, it's in you. So when we see bechem, it means in you. So this is the Hebrew of the passage, and I'll run you through it. Okay, this word here is v'seret. That's a vav. When you see a vav, it is and. Okay, and seret is what it says. So that translates as seret. Think of serration. It's cut. We go back to the definitions we looked at. It means exclusively cut. They don't have any other kind of interpretation of it. It means cuts. So v'seret, when it's in the plural, and cuts. Okay, here we've got nefesh. This is a lamed. It's le, that's a noon, that's a pei, and that's a shin. Le nefesh. When you put le before something, like when you put be before something, it means something. It means from or to. It can mean for. Okay, so le nefesh, actually with the right vowels, it's la nefesh, means uncuts for the dead. Nefesh is a soul. Here it is a dead soul by the context it's used in. Lo titnu. Okay, this is again a lamed followed by an aleph. As I said at the beginning, an aleph takes on the sound of the vowel. The vowel in this case is that dot there. Sometimes you get the vav with the dot above it. It's called the cholam. Sometimes you don't get the vav, you just get the dot. But it's a cholam. The verbs take the sound of what they're called. So a cholam makes an O sound. So lamed, aleph taking the vowel, makes lo. When you say lo something, it means do not do that thing. That's how all of the thou shalt nots are written in the 10 words. They are lo, whatever. Then that word that we look for, that's a tav, a chirik, an a tav. So that's tit, with that we looked at, which distinguishes that from the end of the word. So it's tit, the first syllable. And we've got a noon. There we've got a vav with the dot to the left of it. Okay, when you have it to the left, it doesn't make an O, it makes an U. So when you see a vav, it can be an O or an U, depending where the vowel is. So putting all of that together, it's lo titnu. Okay? Lo titnu being thou shalt not or do not allow. So far we've got and cuts for the dead, do not allow. Be vasem. Okay? Break that one down for you. You can see here, reading right to left, you've got these 2 letters, and they are the same letter. One of them has a dot in the middle. That's called the dagesh. Okay, when you've got a dot in the middle, that letter is pronounced as a B. When you don't have a dot in the middle, it's pronounced as a V. That's why sometimes in the presentations you'll see a B with a line underneath it. That means there's no dot in the Hebrew, and so it's a V, and I'll always pronounce them as V's. So that's bivasem, okay? If you're familiar with the word basar, is flesh, okay? That is the word basar there in the middle. Beit, sheen, resh. That's basar, but this doesn't have a dot, so it's visar in this case, but it's the same Hebrew letter. So beit before it means in. Bivasem means in the flesh. Now we've got another vav at the beginning meaning and then that word there, ketavet, okay? And impressions. Ka'aka. So it's not ketavet seret as Strong suggested that it was, or as Blue Letter Bible suggested it was. The order that it's actually written in the Hebrew here is v'ketavet ka'aka. Okay, so that's and impressions of cuts. It'd be a good idea if people are watching online, skip back in the video and you can verify that that's what these words mean. But we've got vav, ketavet, ka'aka there. Then we have that same word we looked at before, lamed and an aleph with a chulam vowel, so that's low. And then that same word again, titnu, low titnu, do not allow. Then we've got that word that we looked at, that's bechem, that's a bait. This one's got a dot in, so it's a b. And then this is a chem sound, that's a mem. So it's bechem, in you. And then this final passage here, you'll all probably recognize Yahovah there. And that's Ani Yahovah. Ani Yahovah in Hebrew means I am Yahovah. So the whole passage would say, do not round the corner of your head, nor destroy the corner of your beard, and cuts for the dead do not allow in the flesh, and impressions of cuts do not allow in you. I am Yahovah. And that matches up with everything that we see in Scripture. What is forbidden is the cutting of the flesh for the dead. Tattoo marks is not something that exists in Hebrew. There's probably a Hebrew word for tattoo now, but it doesn't exist in the Scriptures. Not recommending anyone gets a tattoo, but it's important for us to understand the word of Elohim accurately. Deuteronomy 14 verse 1 says, do not cut yourselves, nor shave the front of your head for the dead. That's like a condensed version of what we see in Leviticus. Again, Deuteronomy is the second giving of the law. Do not eat whatever is abominable. Now, Deuteronomy 14 is all the clean and the unclean animals, and I'm not going to go through all of the clean and unclean animals. If people want to look at Torah portion Shmini from all the years we've done it, or this Torah portion from the previous years we've done it, you can have teaching on the animals that it is abominable to eat. Let's skip to the end of Deuteronomy 14, or the midway point of Deuteronomy 14. It says, do not eat whatever dies of itself. We were talking about this before. Okay, whatever dies of itself, this word is a word that means essentially corpse. Everywhere else, where it says, do not touch the corpse of those animals, it's the same word as is translated, whatever dies of itself here. And what it's talking about is something that has freshly died. Okay, we know that John the Baptist had camel hair. He wore unclean animals. So it's not that if something has died or something has become a corpse, that later you can't do anything with it, you can't have any product from it. This is talking very specifically about something's corpse. Okay, and this is saying, do not eat if you come across a corpse somewhere. By interpretation, something that's died of itself. You don't know where that corpse has come from. Where did it come from? This animal has died of itself somewhere. Give it to the stranger who is within your gates to eat it, or sell it to a foreigner, for you are a set-apart people to Yahovah your Elohim. Do not cook a young goat and its mother's milk, in its mother's milk. Which may seem like a strange command to us. Give it to the stranger or to the foreigner. And that's where we're going to pick up when we come back in the second part and we look at the issue of giving to the poor. So this is the verse that we left it at. We'll be coming back and addressing what's between this verse and where we're going to pick up in a second in Deuteronomy 15 in the third part. This verse tells us that we can't eat of these things because we are set apart to Yehovah, but we can give them to the stranger or to the foreigner. Very simple reason for that. They're not set apart to Yehovah. But as to whether you would give it to the stranger or the foreigner, that's something that perhaps bears examination. So Deuteronomy 15 says, at the end of 7 years, you make a release of debts. And this is the word of the release. Every creditor is to release what he has loaned to his neighbor. He does not require it of his neighbor or his brother because it is called the release of Yehovah. So very plainly what this law says is that at the end of 7 years, when it comes to your neighbor or your brother, you don't require a debt. Of a foreigner, you could require it. But your hand is to release whatever is owed by your brother. Okay, so when it comes to a foreigner, it's different. Again, a foreigner is not set apart to Yehovah. So you could require it of them. We all know, though, that Yeshua fulfilled the Torah. Yeshua fully preached the Torah. So what did Yeshua say about paying back debts? And you say it was just your neighbor or your brother? In Luke 6:30-35, he says, give to everyone who asks of you, and from him who takes away what is yours, do not ask it back. And as you wish men should do to you, you also do to them in the same way. So we can apply this principle to the idea of, well, if you don't want to eat an animal that's died of itself, should you give it to a foreigner? If you would have it that somebody would forgive your debt, should you forgive the debt of a foreigner? On a very basic level, we could apply this principle. However, this principle is given in a specific context, and it's actually given in the context of the very thing that we're looking at. It says, if you love those loving you, what favor have you? For sinners too love those loving them. And if you do good to those doing good to you, what favor have you? For even sinners do the same. And if you lend to those from whom you expect to receive back, what favor have you? Even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much back. So the very context that the statement of as you wish men to do to you, do also to them, the very context of it is this statement, this other principle that he discusses. Don't just give to those from whom you expect to receive back. He says, rather love your enemies, do good, lend, expecting none in return. Okay, that's your expectation. If you think somebody unworthy of a loan because you don't think that they're going to pay you back, you should still lend to that person. You know that he's fulfilling the Torah in what he preaches. He comes with doctrine that is not his own, but is the ones who sent him. So when the Torah says, of a neighbor or a brother, do not expect it back, but of a foreigner, you could expect it back, we have a great example of something in which the word can test our hearts. Okay, the word can judge where we're at. If you say, oh, well, I'm not allowed to give an animal with a defect as any other type of sacrifice, but I can give it as a peace offering, that tests your heart. You're permitted to do it, but it will test your heart in whether you want to do that. The rest of the Torah tells you, take your best and offer that to Yehovah. But we have that exception where you could give an animal that has a defect if it's a voluntary offering. But that tests your heart, just as you expect it back of your brother or a neighbor. You don't after 7 years, but of a foreigner you could expect it back. That tests your heart as to whether you'll do that or whether you'll treat everyone alike. And Yeshua's direct teaching is treat everyone alike, lend to people from whom you don't expect to receive in return. Psalm 37 verse 21 also teaches us this principle. It should be no surprise that Yeshua agrees with the Torah and the writings, the Psalms. The wrongdoer is borrowing and does not repay, but the righteous one shows favor and gives. So it doesn't matter whether somebody is going to repay you, whether you think somebody is a wrongdoer. The righteous one shows favor and gives, and this is what Yeshua teaches. Okay, if you're righteous, and you will show favor and you'll give. If I'm correct, actually, this word to give here is the same as to lend, which is what it's talking about in the Torah. And what Yeshua is talking about, lend to those from whom you do not expect to receive back. The wrongdoer who borrows and doesn't repay, for example. Only there should be no needy one among you. For Yehovah does greatly bless you in the land which Yehovah your Elohim is giving you to possess as an inheritance. So it tells us here there should be no needy one. That's how it should be. But as it goes on, it's going to reveal that that's not what Yehovah is apprehending will be the situation. This word evion, okay, the outline of biblical usage in Blue Letter Bible is fairly accurate. Basically one who is in need. Okay, they have need of something. Okay, that's what an evion is. For the definition of the words which are translated into our English Bibles as poor, I'd recommend this teaching because there are somewhere between 8 and 10 words which are translated as poor, which all have a variety of different meanings. Okay. Psalm 112, 4-9 says, light has risen in the darkness to the straight ones, those showing favor, the compassionate and the righteous. Good is a man showing favor and lending. He sustains his matters in judgment. For he is never shaken, the righteous is remembered forever. He is not afraid of an evil report. His heart is steadfast, trusting in Yehovah. His heart is upheld. He is not afraid while he looks on his adversaries. He scattered the broad. He gave to the evion, who's in need. His righteousness is standing forever. His horn is exalted with esteem. Okay, so this is how Yehovah would have us to be, obviously drawing on the Torah that we're reading. Exodus 23, 10-11 says, and for 6 years you are to sow your land and shall gather its increase. But the 7th year you are to let it rest and shall leave it, and the evion of your people shall eat. Okay, so this is an example of a mincha, a spiritual mincha. When you are doing with your material goods, not as you would naturally do with them, but trusting in Yehovah and doing what he has said to do. Okay, naturally you're not going to take a year off from producing crops and leave it for anyone who's in need. But Yehovah says to do that. Just as giving to the poor, lending to people from whom you do not expect to receive back is a mincha. Job 34 verse 19 says, this is Elihu when he comes at the end of the book of Job and he's speaking to Job the truth. Where he says, who is not partial to princes, nor regards the rich more than the poor, for they are all the work of his hands. Okay, this is something that Jilly asked me about the other week, about we're not to be partial to one group of people over another. So why do we treat different groups of people differently? When it says to not be partial to somebody, it's talking about in terms of mishpat, in terms of justice being done. So if you are to do justice towards somebody, the rich and the poor, you are to treat the same. You don't treat anyone differently because they're rich, or anyone differently because they're poor. You don't say, oh, they're the poor people. We're going to allow justice to be different for poor people. The issue is regarding the rich more than the poor. To treat the poor differently in giving to the poor, that's not showing partiality to them. That's just doing what the scriptures have told us to do. Verse 4 of Deuteronomy 15 says, only there should be no Evion among you, for Yehovah does greatly bless you in the land which Yehovah your Elohim is giving you to possess as an inheritance. So there we have it. There should be no needy one. Only if you diligently obey the voice of Yehovah your Elohim to cherish to do all these commands which I am commanding you today. And as we've seen, there are actually two groups of people who are being addressed, those who will do this and those who won't. Deuteronomy 15:5 in the Septuagint is different, as you'll see, to in the Masoretic text. It says, but if in hearing you should hearken to the voice of Yehovah your God, to cherish and do all these commands which I charge to you today. Okay, that's very different from what it says in the Masoretic text, which is, for Yehovah your Elohim has blessed you as he promised you, and you have lent to many nations, but have not borrowed, and you have ruled over many nations, and over you they do not rule. Okay, so I just want you to be aware that there's that difference there. In the Septuagint, it explains something about what it is to diligently shema, if you hear and hearken. Okay, you can differentiate those two concepts easily in Greek and in English. In Hebrew, it's just shema. Do you shema can mean do you hear, it can also mean do you hear and hearken. Matthew 6:19-34 says, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. And we lay up treasure in heaven by giving that spiritual mincha. It says, for where your treasure is, there your heart shall be also. The lamp of the body is the eye. If your eye is good, all your body shall be enlightened. If your eye is evil, all your body shall be darkened. And we'll read in this Torah portion about having an evil eye towards someone. It's being stingy. Okay, so all of this is talking about if you use your material goods, as Yehovah says, you lay up for yourselves treasure in heaven. And this is the context of the statements which are going to follow this. Because what people usually do is they ignore this bit and they just take the quotes which come after this out of context. But we need to understand that this is what it's talking about when we read what comes after it. No one is able to serve two masters, for either he shall hate the one and love the other, or else he shall cleave to the one and despise the other. You are not able to serve Elohim and Mammon. Because if you cling to Elohim, you will use your material goods as he has said to use. And you cling to him and you serve him. And then you use your Mammon for what he says. If you cling to Mammon, when it comes to Elohim asking you to do certain things to serve him, you cannot do it. You say, oh no, I'll be left with less Mammon for myself. So you cannot serve Elohim and Mammon. Because of this, they're the important words. For what we're looking at, they're the words that we need to concentrate on in this passage. Because of this, I say to you, because of what? Because of using your material goods for what Yehovah has told you to do. Laying up treasure in heaven, serving Elohim rather than Mammon. Because of this, I say to you, do not worry about your life, what you shall eat or drink, or about your body, what you shall put on. Is not life more than food, and body more than the clothing? Look at the birds of the heaven, for they neither sow nor reap nor gather into storehouses, yet your heavenly Father does feed them. Are you not worth more than they? And which of you, by worrying, is able to add 1 cubit to his lifespan? So why do you worry about clothing? Note well the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. These are the verses, aren't they, that everyone plucks out of context and says, look, Yehovah has promised that he is going to look after my financial situation at all times. Yehovah promises that to those who serve him rather than mammon, those who lay up treasure in heaven, those who perform the spiritual mincha. It's because of doing that that he gives that guarantee to us. And I say to you that even Shlomo in all his esteem was not dressed like one of these. But if Elohim so clothes the grass of the field, which exists today and tomorrow is thrown into the furnace, how much more you, O you of little belief? How much more you, O you of little belief? Do not worry then, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For all these the Gentiles seek for, and your heavenly Father knows that you need all these. But seek first the kingdom of Elohim and his righteousness, and all these matters shall be added to you. So what is it saying? It's saying, do the mincha, follow Yehovah, do those commands, treat your mammon as if it's his mammon. Lay up for yourselves treasure in heaven. Because of that, he gives you that guarantee. On what proviso? What's the caveat? Seek first the kingdom of Elohim, and all these things shall be added to you. Elohim doesn't just promise anyone who claims his name these things. He says those who give the mincha, those who cling to him and serve him rather than mammon. Do not then worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow shall have its own worries. Each day has enough evil of itself. Don't think, if I serve Elohim with my mammon today, I'm not going to have enough for tomorrow. Concentrate on what Elohim's asked you to do and let him worry about all of the rest. Proverbs 19 verse 17 says, he that has pity upon the poor lends unto Yehovah, and that which he has given will he pay him again. These are all the promises, aren't they? If you give to the poor, Yehovah will repay you. It was promised in our Torah portion as well. We'll see as we go on. Do not be grieved in your heart to have to do these things, because of them, blessings come upon you. Like when he says, give the tithe, because when you give the tithe, I'll open up the windows of heaven for you and the blessing will pour out. People who do not give the spiritual mincha, all of these things, and they say, oh, I can't afford to. They misunderstand what all of this is actually about. They misunderstand that relationship and that reliance on Yehovah. Yehovah says, don't worry about doing it. Don't worry about what's going to happen to you if you do those things. Seek first the kingdom of Elohim, and then I've promised you that I will look after you, and you don't have to worry about all those things that I know you need beforehand. Proverbs 11:24-28 says, there is one who scatters, yet increases more, and one who withholds more than is right, but it comes to poverty. Okay, so what's right? What's right in Yehovah's eyes? It's his Torah, isn't it? It's doing his commandments. If you're withholding more than what is right, you're not doing with your material possessions as Yehovah asks you to do. There's one who scatters and yet increases more. They're the promises that we're given. Trust in Yehovah. Don't trust in your own eyes. Don't lean on your own understanding, but trust in Yehovah. And then there's one who withholds more than what is right, but they come to poverty. The generous soul is enriched, and he who waters is also watered himself. The people curse him who withholds grain, but blessing is on the head of him who sells it. Think of Joseph in Egypt. He who earnestly seeks good seeks what is pleasing, but to him who seeks evil, it comes to him. Who earnestly seeks good. You can say, I'm seeking good, but if what you're actually doing is stubbornness, and you are refusing to do what Yehovah says because you've got your own set of reasons why you won't do what Yehovah says, then what you are doing is you're actually seeking evil. Call it whatever you want. It's like we often comment and we say, it's amazing that people have these things in their lives, and yet they then think, I'm in good standing with Yehovah. I'm refusing to do what he said, but in some way they've deluded themselves. They've been led astray that it's okay to do those things, and they're still one of Yehovah's followers. They still are obedient to him. He who trusts in his riches falls, but the righteous flourish like a leaf. Okay, it's the exact opposite of what we'd expect. We've looked recently at the idea of faith, that faith requires of you to do something that you fear. All of the examples of faith that we have in Scripture are doing something of you, doing something which is asked of you, which you fear the outcome of. And that can be different for everyone. For many people, it's exactly this, though. They want to cling to mammon and are unable to serve Elohim as a result. Verse 7 of Deuteronomy 15 says, when there is an Evion with you, of one of your brothers, within any of the gates in your land which Yehovah your Elohim is giving you, do not harden your heart, nor shut your hand from your needy brother. For you do certainly open your hand to him, certainly lend him enough for his need, whatever he needs. Okay, people, I see this, I've left using Facebook now because of this exact sort of thing. It drives me crazy. But you'll have somebody who's got a need, and they'll post about it on Facebook, and then you'll have a whole bunch of people who are saying, if I was able, I would help. You're not able? You haven't got anything to help that person? Yehovah said he will repay you. And yet people think that they're going to be leaving themselves without, because they misunderstand this and they're hard-hearted against it. We're not to harden our heart against our brother who's in need or against any of the commands of Yehovah. Be on guard lest there be a word in your heart of worthlessness, a word of Belial. Okay, Belial is not a deity like Baal. Belial means worthlessness, a word of worthlessness in your heart saying, the 7th year, the year of release is near, and your eye is evil against your Evion brother, and you give him naught. And he's cried out concerning you to Yehovah, and it has been a sin in you. Okay, in the 7th year, you're going to have to forgive that debt. So if somebody comes to you and they say, I need X amount of money, and you know that next year is the 7th year, naturally, the way that we think is, I'm not going to have that money. Told in the scriptures, Yehovah will pay it back to you. It's okay, you're not going to be without. But naturally within our heart, we have these words of worthlessness. Exactly the same thing that we've been looking at. When something comes up in your heart, do not fear. Rely on the word like Joshua did, like Jacob did, like Yeshua did. That's the pattern. So maybe this is something that you're being tested in. But whatever it is, do not have that word of worthlessness in your heart. Do not be persuaded by something that is worthless. Be persuaded by the truth. You do certainly give to him, and your heart should not be grieved. Those things might come up in your heart, and you think, oh, panic, the 7th year is next year. I'm going to have to forgive that debt, and then I'm not going to have that money. I need that money for this, and I need it for that. Your heart should not be grieved, though. Maybe it is at first, but then it's reassured by the word. When you give to him, because for this reason, Yehovah your Elohim does bless you in all your works and in all to which you put your hand. All of these commands which require that spiritual mincha to be made all come with this reassurance from Elohim. Don't worry, he knows what we're like. Don't worry, I'm going to bless you more for doing it. Now it's just a matter of whether you believe me or not. 2 Samuel 2, 7-9, David sent some messengers to Yavesh Gilad. They say, Yehovah makes poor and makes rich. He brings low and lifts up. He raises the poor from the dust. He lifts the needy from the dunghill to sit with princes and make them inherit a throne of esteem. For the supports of the earth or the pillars of the earth belong to Yehovah, and he has set the world upon them. He guards the feet of his kind ones, but the wrong are silent in darkness. For man does not become mighty by power. It's interesting that this Torah portion is on the heels of, which Charlie did last week, where the context for this is set. Okay? Yehovah is the one who provides you with the means to get wealth. And that's the context that all of the rest of this follows from. Yehovah makes poor and makes rich. Yet we think by withholding things and being disobedient to Yehovah, we're going to put ourselves in a good position. Deuteronomy 8 verse 18 is the verse. But you shall remember Yehovah your Elohim, for it is he who gives you power to get wealth, in order to establish his covenant. It's his part in the covenant. He said, if you do these things, I'll bless you. He gives you the power to get wealth. If we think it resides within us, then we've been led astray. We've believed a lie. Luke 18:18-25 says, and a certain ruler asked him, saying, good teacher, what shall I do to inherit everlasting life? So Yeshua said to him, why do you call me good? No one is good except one, Elohim. You know the commands. Do not commit adultery, do not murder, do not steal, do not bear false witness, respect your father and your mother. And he said, all of these I've watched over from my youth. Hearing this, Yeshua said to him, one you lack. One of the commands is one that you lack. Sell all that you have and distribute to the poor, and you shall have treasure in heaven, and come, follow me. This is what the people who, in Yeshua's day, who were joined with his party, which is what this word follow means when we looked at the rock that followed them in the wilderness. It's the same word. All of the people would sell their possessions, and they would follow Yeshua. And he says, give to the poor, which is the command that that person was lacking. And it's the same thing that we often talk about. Everyone's going to be tested in a different way. Everyone's going to have a sticking point where they get to and they're like, I keep all of the commands. Right, apart from that one. Not going to look at that one. This guy was the same. When he heard this, he became intensely sad. For he was extremely rich. He didn't want to give to the poor. He wanted to trust in his riches. He wanted to trust in his wealth rather than in Yehovah. When Yeshua saw that he became intensely sad, he said, how hard it is for those who have riches to enter the kingdom of Elohim. Don't let this be you. For it is easier for a camel to enter through a needle's eye than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of Elohim. He could have said this about any commandment. Those commandments, you know, the ones where people will say that they're obedient, but then in whatever it is, they don't do it. Because it's the sticking point for them. It's what they're being individually tested in. And he could have said this about any of the commandments. You know the commands. Oh, I've done all the commands. One of them you lack, though. 1 Timothy 6:17-19 says, charge those who are rich in this present age not to be high-minded, nor to trust the uncertainty of riches. So this is the principle for anyone who has riches. Don't trust in your riches, but in the living Elohim who gives us richly all for enjoyment. Okay, so this is why Elohim blesses us with things. It's for our enjoyment. He cares about us. He doesn't mind us enjoying things that we have. To do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous, ready to share. Storing up for themselves a good foundation. That's the treasure in heaven for the time to come, so that they lay hold on everlasting life. So that's the advice for anyone who may be watching this who has wealth at your disposal. Do good, do the Torah, give the mincha, be rich in good works, be rich towards Elohim. We're going to hear about somebody in a little bit who had many riches but was not rich towards Elohim. Proverbs 23:4-5 says, do not labor to be rich. Cease from your own understanding. Okay, so there's a dichotomy in Scripture. It says that wealth is a good thing. But Scripture explicitly tells us not to labor in order to become rich. That's the problem. Wanting to become rich and wanting to labor in order to bring riches to you. Labor is actually a good thing, but laboring with that particular goal in mind, I want to become rich. I have this love for riches. Do you set your eyes on that which is not? For riches certainly make themselves wings. They fly away like an eagle to the heavens. They're nothing. And when you've got abundance, you buy something that's nice, maybe it's going to cost you a load of money to maintain that thing. Riches make themselves scarce. They are not. They have no permanence at all. So don't labor to be rich, because that's not where the value is. 1 Timothy 6:6-10. But reverence with contentment is great gain. Okay, so serving Yehovah with contentment for what you have is great gain. This immediately precedes that advice to rich people that we saw before. But we brought naught into the world, and it's impossible to take any out. When we have food and covering, we shall be satisfied with these. But those wishing to be rich fall into trial and a snare, and into many foolish and injurious lusts, which plunge men in ruin and destruction. So having riches is something that Yehovah blesses people with in order for them to enjoy. But this desire to be rich and that love of riches leads people astray. It leads them into ways in which they're tested, and in ways in which they're ensnared, and into lusts for things which are injurious to them. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, for which some, by longing for it, have strayed from the belief and pierced themselves through with many pains. That desire to be rich, by longing for riches, they've strayed from the faith. You might think, well, it would be fine. It would be fine. All I want is all those riches, but it'd be fine if I got them. And then I wouldn't stray from the faith at all. But it's that love of money which will taint that afterwards. Hebrews 13:5-6 says, let your way of life be without the love of money. Be satisfied with what you have. For he himself said, I shall never leave you nor forsake you. Okay, so be satisfied with what you have. Give to Yehovah what is due to Yehovah. Be satisfied with that. And he said, I will never leave you or forsake you. If you don't store up treasure for yourself on earth, and you store it up rather in heaven, you give the mincha, he will not leave you or forsake you. He's guaranteed you this, and he guarantees it all the way throughout Scripture in many different places. So that we boldly say, Yehovah is my helper, I shall not fear what man shall do to me. That's the reason for it, isn't it? It's that reliance on Yehovah. Because those who desire to be rich actually desire to be free from a reliance on Yehovah. They want a security net so that they don't have to rely on Elohim. Ecclesiastes 5:10-20 says, he who loves silver is not satisfied with silver, nor he who loves wealth and increase. That too is futile. Again, it's the love of money which is being spoken of here. With the increase of goods, there is an increase of those consuming them. What advantage then is there to their owners but to look on? Okay, so reminds me of before I knew Yah, knowing of a certain rock star. I won't go into it, but they had this party lifestyle. They had all of the money to buy all the drugs that they wanted. And then as soon as this happens, you get a ton of people who want to come and they want to be your mate. Okay? Sweet is the sleep of a laborer, whether he eats little or much. But the plenty of the rich does not let him sleep. There's no value in that. What the word says that there's value is things like labor and being able to enjoy the fruits of your labor. So whether you're rich or whether you're poor, having sweet sleep and being able to sleep at night is a good thing. If you've just got loads of abundance, that doesn't provide you necessarily with good sleep. It's that very simple thing that Yahovah can provide you with. There is a sickly evil I have seen under the sun, riches kept for their owner for his evil. And these are these sorts of injurious lusts that he was talking about. When you have loads of money and you walk according to the word, there's actually very little that you can spend money on. Okay, you're not going to go out and get an ounce of cocaine or whatever it may be that people would blast their money on. Okay, so riches kept for their owner for his evil. It's a sickly evil. Those riches perish through evil use. He brings forth the son, and there is naught in his hand. As he came naked from his mother's womb, so he returns to go as he came, and from his labor, which goes into his hand, he takes none whatsoever. So he's labored to be rich. He's got this love of riches, but ultimately he can't take any of it with him. He would have been better using it to store up treasure in heaven. This too is a grievous evil. Exactly as he came, so he goes. And what gain has he since he toiled for the wind? Okay, so all this laboring to be rich, what gain did it give him in the end? He went the same way as anyone else. All his days he also eats in darkness and with much sorrow and sickness and wrath. This is the outcome that Yahovah tells us will come from being evil, withholding your money and spending it on your own evil desires. See what I have seen. It is good and pleasant for one to eat and drink. Okay, that's good. Yahovah's given us these things to appreciate. If you've got loads of riches, you can't even spend your riches on that because you're just going to end up massively fat. And to enjoy the good of all his labor in which he toils under the sun all the days of his life, which Elohim gives him, for it is his portion. Okay, so these are the things that we have in life to enjoy. Okay, laboring the good of the fruit of our labor. Further, when Elohim has given any man riches and wealth and permitted him to enjoy them and to receive his portion and rejoice in his labor, this is a gift of Elohim. Okay, so if Elohim blesses you with material wealth, he wants you to enjoy it. That's good. But what he doesn't want you to do is to lust after those things. He doesn't want you to have that love of money and to labor to be rich, for that to be the end in and of itself. Though it not be much, let him remember the days of his life, because Elohim bears witness by the gladness of his heart. That's an amazing thing. Elohim bears witness to who he is by the gladness that is in the heart of the one whom he blesses. That's a good thing. Okay, and we can all appreciate that. But to desire that for ourselves is to break one of the 10 Commandments, isn't it? It's to want something which is not ours, to lust after something which is not ours, and our desire for things to be different, our love of money and our laboring to be rich is trying to shape things to how we want them, rather than doing what is good, laboring, and then Yahovah blessing you as a result. Psalm 62 verse 10 says, do not trust in oppression, do not become vain in robbery. If riches increase, do not set your heart on them. So if he does bless you, don't set your heart on those riches. Don't then allow yourself to trust in those riches. That was the advice Paul gave to Timothy. Tell those who are rich not to trust in their riches. Proverbs 28:19-22 says, he who tills his land is satisfied with bread, but he who pursues vanities is filled with poverty. A man of truth has many blessings, but one in a hurry to be rich does not go unpunished. Okay, and again, this comes back to this idea of spending on your evil desires. There was a time in my life before I knew Yah when I would get a decent amount of money. I was not paying any tax at that point in time either. So I'd get £300-400 a week, and then by the Monday, I would have no money because I'd spent it all on drugs or whatever it was. He who tills his land is satisfied with bread. He's satisfied with those simple things which come from that. But if you pursue vanities, they'll lead to poverty. To show partiality is not good, because for a piece of bread, a man would transgress. A man with an evil eye runs after wealth and does not know that poverty awaits him. Again, it's the inverse of what we would expect. We think, if I give of my material goods to Yehovah, I'm going to be left with less. We would also think, if I go after wealth, and I'm trying to amass for myself wealth as a believer in Yehovah, that would be good, and I'll have loads of wealth. Yehovah says, if you do that, you don't know that poverty awaits you in that. Proverbs 10 verse 4-5 says, poor is he who works with a lazy hand, but the hand of the hard worker makes rich. So working hard is good to Yehovah. And that doesn't say that everyone who is poor is lazy. It says if you're lazy, you'll be poor. He who gathers in summer is a wise son. He who sleeps in harvest is a son who causes shame. So in all of this, don't labor to be rich. Doesn't mean don't labor. It doesn't mean don't work hard towards something that you can put pride in. Okay? Working hard's good. Working hard in order for your end to be making loads of money is not good. That's the love of money, and that leads to bad things. Matthew 3:10-11 says, and the crowds asked him, saying, what then shall we do? This is John the Baptist. Answering, he said to them, let him who has 2 undergarments share with him who has none, and let him who has food do likewise. It's simple. If you've got something and somebody else doesn't have something, give them that thing. Don't say, oh, I'll pray for you. I wish that I could help, but I'm not able to help. If you've got something, even if you've only got 2 of them and they need the other one, give to them of that. James 2:14-17 says, my brothers, what use is it for anyone to say he has belief but does not have works? This belief is unable to save him. If a brother or sister is naked and in need of daily food, but one of you says to them, go in peace, be warmed and be filled, but you do not give them the bodily needs, what use is it? So also belief, if it does not have works, is in itself dead. There's no point saying to people who are in this position, oh, pray that Yehovah will bless you with things. I'll pray for you too. And then Yehovah will bring those things to you. If you don't help them when you've got the things and they haven't, what good is that? That faith is dead. Luke 12:16-21 says, he then spoke a parable to them, saying, the land of a certain rich man yielded well. And he was reasoning within himself, saying, what shall I do, because I have no room to store my crops? And he said, I'm going to do this, pull down my storehouses and build greater, store all my crops and my goods there. Then say to myself, so you have many goods laid up for many years, take your ease, eat, drink, rejoice. But Elohim said to him, you mindless one, this night your soul shall be demanded from you. And who shall own what you've prepared? So is he who is storing up treasure for himself and is not rich towards Elohim. He who serves mammon but does not serve Elohim. You can't serve both. This guy, the fact that he was rich isn't the problem. The fact that he was not rich towards Elohim in that is the problem. This is the wisdom of the world. And unfortunately, or regrettably would be a better word to use, it is something that is inherent in us that needs to be repented of. Money speaks only one language. If you save me today, I will save you tomorrow. Okay? Sounds like it maybe makes sense on some kind of level, but this is how people think. They don't think Yehovah is the one that's going to save me tomorrow. If I'm in need and I'm destitute, then it's going to be Yehovah, because I've done all of these things that he's asked me. He has guaranteed to me, he's made a promise to me that he will look after my finances for me. Verse 11 says, because the needy one does not cease from the land. So again, 2 groups of people are spoken to. There should be no needy one among you, but he says, that the needy one's not going to cease from the land because he knows how they are. Therefore, I am commanding you, saying, you do certainly open your hand to your brother, to your poor, and to your needy in your land. Matthew 6, 1-4 says, beware of doing alms before men in order to be seen by them. Otherwise, you have no reward from your Father in heaven. Thus, when you do alms, do not sound the trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the congregations and in the streets to be praised by men. Truly, I say to you, they have their reward. But when you do alms, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your alms shall be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret shall himself reward you openly. So it's the inverse of what we think. We want to do things to be seen by other people, so that you think, well, what's the point in me doing this thing if nobody's even going to know that I did this and I lifted this person out of poverty? What's the point in doing it? To us who believe the word, though, we're doing it before Yehovah. And this is true of any kind of giving. Don't do it to be seen by someone else. Do it to be seen by Yehovah. When your brother is sold to you, a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, and has served you 6 years, then let him go free from you in the 7th year. Okay, it's not talking about taking somebody and selling them. When your brother is sold to you, you think, well, what is being sold to somebody? If you kidnap somebody and you sell them, you're to be put to death. Deuteronomy 23:15-16 says, you do not hand over to his master the slave who has escaped from his master to you. Let him dwell with you in your midst, in the place in which he chooses, within one of your gates, where it is pleasing to him. Do not oppress him. Okay, so it's not talking about forced slavery. It's talking about a happy relationship. And we're going to see how this looks. What we're going to read from here in Deuteronomy 15 will show you Yehovah's beneficence. Exodus 22 verse 3 says, if somebody steals, basically, he shall certainly repay. If he has not the means, then he shall be sold for his theft. So when you read of somebody being sold to you, it's talking about this sort of situation. It's not talking about stealing a load of people and selling them. Verse 12 then says, when your brother is sold to you, a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, and has served you 6 years, then let him go free from you in the 7th year. And when you send him away free from you, let him not go away empty-handed. This is another mincha. Okay, it's another thing that Yehovah tells you what to do with your own goods. Don't let him go away empty-handed. You shall encircle him with your flock, literally what that means. And from your threshing floor, from your winepress, with that which Yehovah has blessed you with, give to him. So when they go out free from you, you make sure that they are accommodated, they have what they need. You have remembered that you were a slave in the land of Mitzrayim, and Yehovah your Elohim redeemed you. Therefore, I am commanding you this word today. And it has been when he says to you, I do not go away from you, because he loves you in your house, because it is good for him with you. So there we have how it is supposed to be, how Yehovah has this relationship. Then you have taken an awl, thrust it through his ear to the door. He has been your servant forever. Do the same to your female servant. It is not hard in your eyes when you send him away free from you. This is the same thinking again. It's not hard in your eyes. Maybe something arises in your heart and you think, what? I could have just gone and got any hired servant, anyone to serve me. Shall not be hard when he goes away, for he has been worth a double hired servant in serving you 6 years. And what that actually means, without going into the Hebrew and explaining it all, is you've basically, in giving them their hire and then giving them loads of goods, you've paid them twice as much as you would have paid someone else. So that should not be hard in your eyes or in your heart. You don't say, I've given them twice as much as I would anyone else. And Yehovah, your Elohim, has blessed you in all that you do. So again, it's another mincha with another promise of blessing that accompanies it. These last few slides, I'm just going to run through Deuteronomy 16 the first 17 verses, which cover the feasts. As I said, from the beginning of this to the end, it's all about the mincha. Deuteronomy 16 covers the feasts. It's covering at the feasts, bring of what Yehovah has blessed you with. Cherish the month of Aviv and perform the Passover to Yehovah your Elohim. For in the month of Aviv, Yehovah your Elohim brought you out of Mitzrayim by night. And you have sacrificed the Passover to Yehovah your Elohim from the flock, from the herd, in the place which Yehovah does choose to make his name tabernacle. Eat no unleavened bread with it, no leavened bread rather with it. For 7 days you eat unleavened bread with it, bread of affliction, because you came out of the land of Mitzrayim in haste, so that you remember the day in which you came out of the land of Mitzrayim all the days of your life. No leaven should be seen with you in all your borders for 7 days. Neither should any of the meat which you sacrifice at evening on the first day stay all night until morning. Okay, so this one is the first of the feasts when they would have had the harvest, the barley harvest. They would come up to Yehovah with all of their vowed offerings, all the free will offerings, all of the things that we saw in Deuteronomy 12. This is one of those 3 times a year. You're not allowed to sacrifice the Passover within any of your gates, which Yehovah your Elohim gives you, but at the place where Yehovah your Elohim chooses to make his name tabernacle, there you sacrifice the Passover in the evening at the going down of the sun, at the appointed time you came out of Mitzrayim. And you have roasted and eaten it in the place which Yehovah your Elohim chooses, and in the morning you have turned and gone to your tents. 6 days you eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day there is an Atzarah to Yehovah your Elohim. You do no work. And that Atzarah is the mandatory day that you must attend. It's not just a day that you're called to be there, it's a day that you have to be there. Count 7 weeks for yourself. Okay, so from the day of first fruits, 7 weeks. Begin to count 7 weeks from the time you begin to put sickle to the grain. And you shall perform the festival of weeks to Yehovah your Elohim, according to the voluntary offering from your hand, which you give as Yehovah your Elohim blesses you. And you have rejoiced before Yehovah your Elohim, you and your son, your daughter, your male servant, female servant, the Levite who's within your gates, the stranger, the fatherless, the widow who are in your midst, at the place where Yehovah your Elohim chooses to make his name tabernacle. And you have remembered that you were a slave in Mitzrayim, and you've cherished and done these laws. So as I said, these things are all in the context of what Charlie covered. It's Yehovah gives you the power to get wealth. Then we've had all of these things. You shall bring all of these things up to Jerusalem. Okay, your vowed offerings, your voluntary offerings. Here, it's telling us about the times that we do that. According to the voluntary offering from your hand, which Yehovah your Elohim blesses you, you give as he blesses you. Exactly the same as the tithe. You give as he blesses you. The poor do not give less. The rich do not give more, in terms that they give a ma'aseh. They give a tenth. Everyone gives a tenth. Whether you get £1 or you get 100,000 pounds, everyone gives a tenth. You give according as Yehovah your Elohim blesses you. Perform the festival of tabernacles for 7 days. This is the 3rd time you go up to Jerusalem. After the ingathering from your threshing floor and from your winepress, when the grapes are harvested. And you have rejoiced in your festival, you and your son and your daughter, your male servant, your female servant, the Levite and the stranger and the fatherless and the widow who are within your gates. And we'll see those things in the 3rd part, how that happens. For 7 days you do observe a festival to Yehovah your Elohim in the place which Yehovah chooses, because Yehovah your Elohim does bless you in all your increase and in all the work of your hands, and you have been only rejoicing. 3 times a year all your males appear before Yehovah your Elohim in the place which he chooses. At the festival of unleavened bread, the festival of weeks, at the festival of birds. None should appear before Yehovah empty-handed. You see in Deuteronomy 12 what everyone is to be bringing. Each one with the gift of his hand, according to the blessing of Yehovah your Elohim, which he has given you. Okay, so the bit that we missed in Deuteronomy 14, middle of 14 to the end of 14 is what we're going to cover. And it's all about the Ma'aseh. We've covered the Ma'aseh, the tithe, the tenth, kind of briefly before, but we're going to look at what Deuteronomy 14 says. It says, you do certainly tithe all the yield of your grain that the field brings forth year by year. You have eaten before Yahovah your Elohim in the place where he chooses to make his name tabernacle, the tithe of your grain, your new wine, your oil, the firstlings of your herds and your sheep, so that you learn to fear Yahovah your Elohim always. So these things were what was to be brought up, and they were to be eaten of before Yahovah, all of those things. Now in verse 22, if that was the only verse about giving a tenth, then people would be right in what they assume sometimes, that it's about grain. You shall tithe all of your grain, all of your food, everything that came from the field. That's what the tithe is about. It's not the only verse that we're given. It's well worth us spending time to look at this, because this is one of those things. There's like a handful of things, isn't there, that people will say, I'm obedient, I do the commands, and yet I'm lacking in one. Okay? This is something. And in fact, all of the minchas that we've looked at, all of them are things that people think, for some reason, that they've got kind of like a get out of jail free card with. Oh yeah, but that's my money, and I need my money, don't I? Okay, so tithe all the yield of your grain. When people just take this scripture out of context and they don't understand it in the rest of the context of scripture, you get memes like this. Okay, you'll see this if you use Facebook and you're in any Torah groups. Tithing was only food. And then, very ironically, it says at the bottom, read scriptures and don't take it out of context. Okay, so was tithing only food? Well, let's consider what it said. It said, tithe your grain. Okay, so that sentence in and of itself tells us that tithing is distinct from grain. Grain is something that you can tithe, but the verb to tithe is something that you do external to grain or anything else that you might tithe out of. Tithing is something external to that. Okay, as I said, the word ma'aseh means tenth. Okay, so it's saying give a tenth of your grain, for example, in Deuteronomy 14. We know that giving a tenth is something which is external to grain. But it's not the only thing that it says about it anyway. Okay, Genesis 14 verse 20, this is Abraham. Hebrews tells us that in this event, Abraham gave a tithe to Melchizedek. And in fact, when it says he gave him a tenth of all, what it says is he gave him a ma'aseh of all. He gave him a tithe of all, is literally what it says anyway. But he didn't just give him a tenth of his grain, he gave him a tenth of everything that he had taken as spoil in that battle. Genesis 28:20 to 22. Yaakov made the vow saying, seeing Elohim is with me. Should be all right. Seeing Elohim is with me and has kept me in the way that I'm going and has given me bread to eat and a garment to put on. When I have returned to my father's house in peace and Yahovah has been my Elohim, then this stone which I have set as a standing column shall be Elohim's house. And of all my grain? No. Of all that you give me, I shall certainly give a tenth to you. And that word again is ma'aseh. I shall give a tithe to you. Deuteronomy 14:24 to 25 says, when the way is too long for you so that you're not able to bring the tithe, you imagine Yehovah gives you a harvest and you've got a tenth of that harvest, you've got a tenth of whatever else. It might be quite a lot for you to take on a journey to Jerusalem. It might be too far for you to go. The place where Yehovah your Elohim chooses to put his name is too far from you. When Yehovah your Elohim is blessing you, then you shall give it in silver. Okay, so what they were to do is they would sell their tithe. They would have the silver, which was 10% of their increase, and then they would give that to Yehovah. And we'll look at this more closely in a second, but when it says turn it into silver and take it to the feast with you, people get that confused and think that it's a separate tithe. And you've got to tithe once to the Levites, and then you tithe again to for a festival tithe, and then you tithe again in the third year, and you end up with whatever percentage people think. But it's not. That silver, which constitutes what people call the festival tithe, is just your tithe that you've sold into silver. And we'll see why they're to sell it into silver and how that works when we get to it. But as we can see here, the tithe is not grain. They sold their increase into money, and then they gave the money. Our increase, whatever we have today, usually is going to be money. The increase that we receive is usually money. It might not be. Elohim might increase you in something else, and of course then a tithe of that would be due to Yehovah. Deuteronomy 14:28 says, at the end of every third year, you shall bring out all the tithe of your increase of that year and store it up within your gates. So it's not just tithe of your grain. What you tithe of is your increase, and your increase can take many forms, myriad forms. That's not what's important, the means by which you're increased. What's important is that you remember a tenth of it belongs to Yehovah, and it's not for you to use for a profane purpose. Deuteronomy 16 verse 15 says, for 7 days you shall observe a festival to Yehovah your Elohim in the place which Yehovah chooses, because Yehovah your Elohim does bless you in all your increase and in all the work of your hands. And that's what the tithe is of. In Luke 18:11-12, it says, the Pharisee stood and began to pray with himself in this way. Elohim, I thank you that I am not like the rest of men, swindlers, unrighteous, adulterers, or even as this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give tithes of all my grain. That's not what he says. He says, I give tithes of all that I possess. So taking Deuteronomy 14 out of context and saying they were told to tithe of their grain, therefore we do not tithe because we don't have grain, is taking the scriptures out of context. This is the context which tithing exists in. Matthew 23:23-24, Yeshua says, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you tithe the mint and the anise and the cumin. Okay, these were things which in those days were incredibly valuable. Salt, spices, they were things of very high value. They weren't just tithing of their grain. Yeshua says, look, you're tithing of these things, yet you've neglected the weightier matters of the Torah, the right ruling or the judgment, the compassion, and the belief or faith. These need to have been done. So tithing needs to have been done without neglecting the others. Okay, so don't neglect the weightier matters of the law. And it's interesting how he characterizes this. He says, blind guides straining out a gnat and yet swallowing a camel. Okay, so in this, okay, if as you're listening to this, you give tithes, don't think, I'm all right, I've done this, I've passed this test, and yet there will be something else in your life in which you've decided, this is the thing which I won't do. It's any of these things. And look what Yeshua says are the weightier matters, the things that you should particularly concentrate on. Okay? Judgment, compassion, and belief or faith. Okay? So if you give a tithe, don't think, oh no, I give a tithe. This is not for me. This is for all of us. This addresses our attitudes to all of these things. When the way is too long for you, so that you are not able to bring the tithe, or when the place where Yehovah your Elohim chooses to put his name is too far from you, when Yehovah your Elohim is blessing you, then you shall give it in silver. Give what? Your tithe. Not an extra tithe. This is your tithe. You shall give your tithe in silver. And have taken the silver in your hand and gone to the place which Yehovah your Elohim chooses. Okay, you can't carry all of the stuff that is a tenth. So you sell it into silver, you go to Jerusalem. When you get there, though, you've given the silver for anything your soul desires, for cattle, sheep, wine, strong drink, for anything your soul desires. And you have eaten there before Yehovah your Elohim, and you have rejoiced, you and your household. So what's it talking about? It's saying you are to eat of your tithe before Yehovah. When you go to the festival, if you've sold it into silver, buy back something so that you can eat of that thing. Okay? Whatever your soul desires within that context, obviously. Do not forsake the Levite who is within your gates, for he has no part nor inheritance with you. Again, you're going to hear this over and over again in the Torah. At the end of 3 years, you bring out all the tithe of your increase of that year, store it up within your gates. And the Levite, because he has no portion nor inheritance with you, the sojourner, the fatherless, the widow who are within your gates, shall come and eat and be satisfied, so that Yehovah your Elohim does bless you in all the work of your hand which you do. So as we read before, when you go to these festivals, it should be that the Levite, the widow, the fatherless, and the sojourner are all there and all eat before Yehovah. In the third year, you take of your tithe within your gates, and you allow these people to come and to eat and to be satisfied. And then it wouldn't just be the Levite who's taking of these things home to subsist on. It would be these categories of people as well. Now, people call this the poor tithe. Okay? They say that this is the tithe that you give to the poor. It's not true. This is the tithe that you give to the sojourner, to the fatherless, and to the widow. The poor are not mentioned. The poor were dealt with in Deuteronomy 15. That is a mincha, extra to the tithe. You don't wait till the third year to provide for the poor. You always provide for the poor. In the third year, you give so that these people can come and eat before Yehovah with the rest of the people. So, the tithe in visual terms. You've got everything that you're increased by, and you take a tithe of that, or a tenth of that, 10% of that. A normal year for an inhabitant of Jerusalem, someone who doesn't have to travel too far with their tithe, you've got your total increase, and you've got 10% of that. You take the tithe to the temple during the feast to give for the Levites. Then you eat of the things you offered as part of offering them and rejoice before Yehovah. Okay? So you take your goods, if it's not too far for you to go, you take them to the temple, you give them to the Levite, and then you share in those things. The festival tithe, as people call it, what that actually is for somebody who lives far from Jerusalem, somebody who sells their tithe into silver. Okay, so they've got their total increase and their tithe. You sell the things Yehovah has increased you with so that you can travel more easily. And then you give the tithe in silver, but buy back things to eat so as to rejoice before Yehovah using some of it. So that's the way that it works. Okay? And the third year, you got your 10%. You store that up within your gates. You use the tithe to allow the Levite, the widow, the fatherless, and the stranger to come and eat before Yehovah. Not the poor. You don't give the tithe to the poor. The poor is a separate responsibility that we have before Yehovah. A lot of people kind of fall into the trap of saying, oh, what I do is I spend my tithe on the poor people. And that's kind of like the third year tithe. And it's not true. You can't spend your tithe on the poor, because your giving to the poor is separate to the matter of the tithe. So Deuteronomy 12:17 says, you are not allowed to eat within your gates the tithe of your grain, or of your new wine, or of your oil, the firstlings of your herd or your flock, or of any of the offerings which you vow, or any of the voluntary offerings, or of the heave offering of your hand. But eat them before Yahovah your Elohim. That's what it is. You eat before him and you rejoice before him. If you've sold your tithe, you take of that and you get something to eat and rejoice before him at the feast. You, your son, your daughter, your male servant, your female servant, the Levite who is within your gates, and you have rejoiced before Yahovah your Elohim in all that you put your hands to. Again, guard yourself that you do not forsake the Levite as long as you live in your land. And we'll see that that's one of the things that Israel did. They neglected the Levites, and then they fell into a state of spiritual corruption. Leviticus 27 verse 30 says, all the tithe of the land, of the seed of the land, or the fruit of the tree, belongs to Yahovah. It is set apart to Yahovah. Does it say belongs to the Levite? It is set apart to the Levite? Doesn't, of course. The tithe is not due to a Levite. It doesn't matter who you give the tithe to. You don't owe it to any man. You owe it to Yahovah. Your duty is to give it to Yahovah. Okay? He says, give it to the Levites. He says, and see, I have given the children of Levi all tithes in Israel. So they're mine, but this is what I've done with it. I've given it to the Levites as an inheritance in return for the service which they are serving, the service of the tent of meeting. But the tithe of the children of Israel, which they present as a contribution to Yahovah, I've given to the Levites as an inheritance. So the Levites didn't have another means of income. They didn't have an inheritance. They didn't have land to farm, for example. That is why I have said to them, among the children of Israel, they have no inheritance. So the situation that we're in, just like with everything that is to be given to a priest, we have to discern from the scriptures who is the person that qualifies as the Levite. Okay, we know who qualifies as our high priest and his sons. Who is the one who qualifies as the Levite? 2 Chronicles 35, 1-3. Yoshiyahu performed the Passover to Yahovah in Yerushalayim. They sacrificed the Passover on the 14th day of the first month. And he set the priests in their duties, strengthened them for the service of the house of Yahovah, and said to the Levites who were teaching all Israel. So this is who the Levites are. Amongst Israel, Yahovah said, I've scattered the Levites. Every town where you dwell, that's what the Levites who are in your midst are, you're going to have a Levite who is to teach the rest of you the Torah. Deuteronomy 17, 8-9, it will actually be. When the matter arises which is too hard for you to judge, between blood and blood, between plea and plea, or between stroke and stroke, matters of strife within your gates, then you shall rise and go to the place which Yahovah your Elohim chooses, and shall come to the priests, the Levites, and to the judge who is in those days, and shall inquire, and they shall declare to you the word of judgment. This was one of the roles of the Levites, the ones who were declaring the word to the people, would teach the word, and as we will see, explain the word to the people. Nehemiah 8, 6-9 says, and Ezra blessed Yahovah, the great Elohim. Then all the people answered, Amen, Amen, while lifting up their hands, and they bowed their heads and worshipped Yahovah with faces to the ground. And Yeshua and Bani and Sherev Yah, Yamin, Akub, Shabbatai, Hodiah, Ma'aseh, Kalita, some Levites. The Levites caused the people to understand the Torah while the people were in their place. And they read in the book of the Torah of Elohim, explaining its meaning, and caused them to understand the reading. So this is what the Levites are. This is who we're looking for today. And it's funny, me teaching you these things and explaining all these things to you because I qualify as somebody that a tithe can be given to. But to me, it's just like everyone gets some kind of test. Often you will find with teachers, they will be afraid of the tithe subject. They won't mention it because they know that they are beneficiaries of the tithe. To me, it would be easier for me to just go, oh yeah, we'll read that bit, but we won't really explain it. But this is key. This is very important to Yehovah. It's part of the mincha. And if this is the thing that people get stuck on and they won't do, then this is the thing which will see them excluded from the kingdom of Elohim. Okay, it's my responsibility, it's my job to teach that people should give their tithe to me. Weirdly. Verse 9 says, Nehemiah, who was the governor, and Ezra the priest, the scribe, and the Levites who taught the people. So the Levites cause people to understand the Torah. They explain its meaning. They teach the people. 2 Chronicles 30 verse 22, and Chizkiyahu spoke to the heart of all the Levites that taught good understanding concerning Yehovah. It's not hard for us to see who it is that Yehovah would have us give this money for. What did he want this money, which is his, used for? And with them he sent Levites. Hello, the people again. They taught in Yehudah, and with them was the book of the Torah of Yehovah. And they went around into all the cities of Yehudah and taught the people. So the tithe is not owed to the Levite, it's owed to Yehovah. But Yehovah tells us what it is that we're to do, who it is that he wants that given to. 2 Kings 17, 27 to 28 says, and the king of Ashur commanded, saying, send one of the priests whom you exiled from there to go there. Let him go and dwell there, and let him teach the judgment of the Elohim of the land. And one of the priests who they'd exiled from Shomeron came and dwelt in Bethel and taught them how to fear Yehovah. So this is when a load of people who weren't Israel came to dwell in the land, and loads of bad stuff started happening to them. They were told, send one of the priests. They're going to teach the Torah of Elohim so that they can learn to fear him, and so that all of these bad things can stop happening. Deuteronomy 33, 8 to 10, of Levi he said, your Tumim and your Urim belong to your kind one, whom you tried at Massah, with whom you contended at the waters of Merivah, who said of his father and mother, I have not seen them, and he did not acknowledge his brothers or know his own children, for they have guarded your word and watched over your covenant. They teach your judgments to Jacob and your Torah to Israel. So again, all the way through, it's not difficult for us to understand exactly who are the Levites today. It's the people who have been scattered amongst Israel. Okay, we've been dispersed to the four corners of the earth. Among us now, imagine in Israel, they had the Levites scattered around everywhere. Now amongst the world, we've got the Levites scattered around everywhere. So when we understand this, I've given the children of Levi all tithes in Israel as an inheritance in return for the service which they're serving, the service of the tent of meeting. Okay? We corporately are the tent of meeting. The tithes of the children of Israel, which they present as a contribution to Yehovah, I have given to the Levites as an inheritance. That is why I've said to them, among the children of Israel, they have no inheritance. So just as back then, they were to focus on the word, on teaching the word, and causing the people to understand the word so that the people benefited. And so in the case of that priest, all the bad stuff stopped happening to the people, and the people did well. Okay, the same is true today. In 1 Corinthians 9, 1 to 6, Paul writes, am I not an apostle? Am I not free? Have I not seen Yeshua Messiah, our master? Are you not my work in the master? If to others I'm not an apostle. I certainly am to you. For you are the seal of the office of the apostle in the master. So he's writing specifically to the Corinthians. My defense to those who examine me is this: do we not have a right to eat and drink? Do we not have a right to take along a sister, a wife, as do also the other apostles and the brothers of the master and Kepha? Or do only Barnabas and I have no right to refrain from working? So this is the point. Just like the Levites would not work in the field, here the apostles, the people who teach the congregations, they do not do work so that they can do work in service of the tent of meeting. This is what happened, okay? Remember how many times they were told, do not forsake the Levite, do not forsake the Levite. In Nehemiah, when they were all coming back from Babylon and the temple was being reestablished, it says, I learned that the portions for the Levites had not been given to them, for each of the Levites and the singers who did the work had gone back to his field. That's not what they were supposed to be doing. Then I contended with the deputy rulers and said, why is the house of Elohim forsaken? And I gathered them together and set them in their place. So like I said, those things that they're warned about time and time again, keep the Sabbaths, keep them holy, don't forsake the Levite. All of those things, they're all the things that they fell into. And as they were warned against doing those things, so are we. 2 Chronicles 31, 4-6 says, and he said to the people, those who dwelt in Jerusalem, to give the portion for the priests and the Levites, so they were strengthened in the Torah of Yehovah. And as the word spread, the children of Israel brought large quantities of the first fruits of grain and wine and oil and honey and of the increase of the field, and they brought in the tithe of all they brought in abundantly. And the children of Israel and Yehudah, those who dwelt in the cities of Yehudah, brought the tithe of cattle and sheep, even the tithe of the holy, which they were set apart, which they'd set apart to Yehovah the Elohim, they brought in, and they gave heaps. The purpose of this is very simple. Okay, the Levites teach the people how to have good standing before Yehovah. Yehovah then blesses the people as he has promised to do. Then they give a ma'aseh of that to the Levites, who are strengthened by it, and the cycle continues. It's very simple. It's a beautiful thing. We're told in 1 Corinthians 12, verse 12, for as the body is one and has many members, but all the members of that body, being many, are one body. It works the same with us. We're one body. We don't think, I'm the hand who's doing all of the work. The mouth has not done any of this work. It's not how it works. We're all one body, and one part of the body provides for the other part of the body. 1 Corinthians 9 continues and says, who serves as a soldier at his own expense? Who plants a vineyard and does not eat its fruit? Or who shepherds a flock and does not feed on the milk of the flock? Do I say this as a man, or does the Torah say the same too? For it has been written in the Torah of Moshe, you shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain. Is it about oxen Elohim is concerned? Or does he say it because of us all? For this was written because of us, that he who plows should plow in expectation, and the thresher in expectation of sharing. If we've sown spiritual seed among you, is it too much if we reap material goods from you? If others share authority over you, should not rather we? But we have not used this authority, but we put up with all, lest we hinder the good news of Messiah. So back then, it was the same. People did not like to hear this message. People didn't like to hear that they had to give to the poor. The Yehovah could command them what to do with what they had worked for. Do you not know that those serving the set-apart place eat from the set-apart place, and those attending the altar have their share of the offerings of the altar? That's the priests, as we talked about. So also Yehovah instituted that those announcing the good news should live from the good news. Okay? When did Yehovah institute that those sharing the good news should eat of the good news in Scripture? It's when he commanded the tithe, isn't it? That's the only point that we see in the Torah where he commands such. Okay, the good news was told to them as it was told to us. Those giving the good news should live from the good news. That's the tithe. That's the only thing that Paul can be referring to here. 2 Corinthians 9, 6-10 says, and I've seen this verse twisted, it says, this, he who sows sparingly shall also reap sparingly, and he who sows on blessing shall also reap on blessing. Let each one give as purposes in his heart, not of grief or of necessity, for Elohim loves a joyous giver. I've heard people who will take this verse and they'll say, we don't have to tithe. Have you not read that you're not to tithe of grief or necessity, but of a joyful heart? What they don't understand is that the actual implication of that is that it grieves them to do the commands of Yehovah, and that they really are grieved by having to give a tithe. And he says, doesn't he, if you love me, you shall keep my commandments. His commandments are him. So if we love him, we're not going to be grieved by these things. But I've heard people turn this verse around to mean exactly the opposite of what it does mean. If Elohim is able to make all favor overflow toward you, that you always, having all you need in every way, have plenty for every good work. What are good works in terms of Scripture? It's doing the commandments. Okay? Elohim's able to bless you abundantly. That promise which comes with all of the mincha. As it has been written, he scattered abroad, he gave to the poor, his righteousness remains forever, as we read before. He who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food shall supply and increase the seed you have sown and increase the fruit of your righteousness. You are never able to outgive Yehovah. All you need is that belief, to believe his word is true. And if that's the testing of your belief, please don't fail that testing of your belief. Don't say that his word is a lie, that it doesn't apply to you. Hebrews 4:12-13 tells us the word of Elohim is living, working sharper than any two-edged sword, cutting through even to the dividing of soul and spirit, and of joints and marrows, and able to judge the thoughts and intents of the heart. And there is no creature hidden from his sight, but all are naked and laid bare before the eyes of him with whom is our account. The word will judge where you are at. If you need to, make that a sham, that guilt offering. Confess that it is guilt before Yehovah. Don't hide. Don't conceal your transgressions even to yourself. Confess that you're guilty before Yehovah for that thing. Then make the chata'at, the sin offering, which is repentance, and turn. 1 Samuel 2:12-16. Okay, I include this verse because to me it seems obvious where this aversion to the idea of we use our material goods for what Yehovah wants us to use them for. And very simply, it's because men of Elohim, people who are supposed to be men of Elohim, have misused this right back in history. If we go right back to 1 Samuel, okay, right back to the sons of Eli, people were doing the same thing at the same time. The sons of Eli were sons of Belial. They were sons of worthlessness. They were worthless. They did not know Yehovah. And the ruling of the priests with the people was that when any man offered a sacrifice, the priest's servant shall come with a 3-pronged flesh hook in his hand while the meat was cooking. So the sons of Eli were priests, and this is what they were into. And shall thrust it into the basin or kettle or cauldron or pot, and the priest would take for himself all that the flesh hook brought up. Thus they did in Shiloh to all the Israelites who came there. So just like today, you've got people who will teach things and say this is from the word of Elohim in order to enrich themselves. You've got the Christian church who will do away with all of the Torah. The one thing that they'll tell you to do is to tithe, even though the tithe is to be given to those who teach and explain the Torah. Okay? You have people who are trying to enrich themselves based off a twisted version of what Yahovah says. And this is how the priests taught the people. They said, this is what is pleasing to Yahovah. Also, before they burn the fat, the priest servant would come and say to the man who sacrificed, give meat for roasting to the priest, for he does not accept cooked meat from you, but raw. So the Torah says to cook the meat before either party would eat of it. The priests, however, this isn't quite as much use to them, is it? They want the raw meat, what they can keep for longer. So they said, this is what Yahovah says. And if the man said to him, let the fat be burned up first, then take as much as your soul desires, he would then answer him, no, but give it to me now, and if not, I shall take it by strength. And the sin of the young men was very great before Yahovah, for the men despised the mincha of Yahovah. They lightly esteemed it. They took it as if it was something to enrich them, rather than the following of the commands of Yahovah. Philippians 4:16-19, Paul says, because even in Thessalonica, you sent to my need once and twice. Okay, he's not talking about ma'aseh here. He's talking about a mincha, them giving to his need. That would be a mincha if you were to give to somebody who is needy, as we saw in Deuteronomy 15. Not that I seek the gift, but I seek the fruit that is multiplying to your account. So this is the opposite mindset to the sons of Eli, who wanted, they wanted the meat raw, they wanted to take more of it than was due to them, whatever it was. Here Paul is saying, look, I'm not seeking a gift from you. I'm seeking the fruit that will come to you from you doing the commands. Indeed, I have all and more than enough. I have been filled, having received from Epaphroditus what you sent, a sweet-smelling fragrance, an acceptable offering, well-pleasing to Elohim. So Paul equates this again as an offering to Elohim. He equates it with the mincha. My Elohim shall fill all your need according to his riches in esteem by Messiah Yeshua. He says, this is why it is good for you to do this. Okay? Not that I want the gift from you. I want the fruit that comes from that Elohim looking out for you. I want that to multiply to your account. I want you to give that mincha. Deuteronomy 26:12-15 again speaks in terms of the blessing that comes from this. It says, when you have completed tithing, all the tithe of your increase in the third year, which is the year of tithing, and have given it to the Levite, to the stranger, the fatherless, and to the widow, which you will have done in that third year, and they have eaten within your gates and have been satisfied. Okay, so it was taken to Jerusalem. It was then distributed to the Levites, and then those people would take it back, and it's what they would subsist on for the rest of the year. Then you shall say before Yahovah your Elohim, I have put away the set-apart portion from my house, and also have given it to the Levite, to the stranger, to the fatherless, and to the widow, according to all your command, which you have commanded me. I have not transgressed your commands, nor have I forgotten. I have not eaten any of it when in mourning, nor have I removed it for any unclean use, nor given any of it for the dead. So it doesn't matter what situation arose. I didn't use it for anything else other than being set apart to you. I have obeyed the voice of Yahovah my Elohim. I have done according to all that you have commanded me. Look from your set-apart dwelling place from the heavens. Bless your people, Yisrael, the land which you have given us, as you swore to our fathers, a land flowing with milk and honey. So after you've done that, you're in the position then when you can look to Elohim and you can say, please bless me. You've promised in your word to bless me. But it's only when you've done that, you've not taken of it and said, oh, this 10% really, this is Yehovah's, but I'm going to use it for some kind of other thing. I'm going to use it for my own pleasure, or for this, or I think I need it for this or for that. You've not used it for any unclean use, then you ask Yehovah and he can bless you. Yehovah spoke to Moshe saying, speak to the Levites and say to them, when you take from the children of Israel the tithes which I have given from them as your inheritance, then you shall present a contribution, a terumah of it to Yehovah. Okay, so this is important. If you tithe to somebody, they are required by the Torah to tithe of your tithe. Your contribution shall be reckoned to you as grain from the threshing floor and as filling from the winepress. Thus you also present a contribution unto Yehovah from all your tithes, which you receive from the children of Israel, and you shall give from it the contribution to Yehovah and to Aharon the priest. So the way that we do it here, if we receive a tithe, we take a tithe of that tithe. We shouldn't really use the word tithe. It's not a real word, it's tenth. We take a tenth of that tenth and we give it to Aharon, who is Yeshua for us. So we give it to the least of the brethren. When we receive a tenth, we give a tenth, and we give that to the least of the brethren. Put this picture up to illustrate a point. Okay, this is more common than perhaps you would think. People confuse, or perhaps they feel more comfortable with the idea of they give something to a Levite for a specific purpose. Okay, or they give to a ministry. Say somebody buys a ministry a minibus. Okay, and then what they do is they call that their tithe. Maybe people feel more comfortable with being able to say what is done with their money, which they've given. Okay, and they call that a tithe. That's not a tithe. That is, however, a mincha. That is a voluntary offering to Yehovah. It is a terumah to Yehovah. It's something that you lift up to Yehovah. What it's not is a tithe. Just like giving to the poor, that is a mincha. What it's not is a tithe. 1 Samuel 15:17-26 says, Shemuel said, though you were little in your own eyes, were you not the head of the tribes of Israel? And did not Yehovah anoint you king over Israel? And Yehovah sent you on the way and said, go and you shall put under the ban the sinners, the Amalekites, fight against them until they're consumed. Why did you not obey the voice of Yehovah, but swoop down on the spoil and did evil in the eyes of Yehovah? Shaul said to Shemuel, I did obey the voice of Yehovah. I went on the way on which Yehovah sent me, brought back Agag, king of Amalek, and I put Amalek under the ban. But the people took of the spoil of the sheep and cattle, the best of that which should have been put under the ban, to sacrifice to Yehovah, your Elohim, in Gilgal. Okay, so I did obey. I didn't do exactly as I was told, but I did something better. We took the best of these things and we gave them to Yehovah instead of doing what he said to do with them. It's exactly the same mindset as one who would buy a minibus and say, look, I've spent well more than my tithe and I've given this to a ministry. It's the same mindset. I did obey. I am obeying. Not doing what you said, but I am obeying. I've redefined that. Then Shemuel said, does Yehovah delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices, as in obeying the voice of Yehovah? Look, to obey is better than an offering. To heed is better than the fat of rams. The whole purpose of all these things, in my estimation, the giving of offerings, it's all about our obedience. It's not about how many rams we give. It's about, do we give a ram when Yehovah has asked for a ram? The burnt offerings, Yehovah doesn't need any of that stuff. Yehovah doesn't need any money. What he needs is our obedience. Jeremiah 6:19-20, Hear, O earth, see, I am bringing evil upon this people, even the fruit of their thoughts, because they have not listened to my words, nor my Torah. They rejected it. What need have I of frankincense from Shavah and sweet cane from a distant land? Your burnt offerings are not acceptable. Your sacrifices have not been sweet to me. What need have I of your money? What need have I of anything that you wish to give to me, which is in distinction to what I've asked for? What I need from you is for you to be my people, to love me, to cherish my commands, and to obey me. That's all he asks for. Genesis 4:5-7. And he did not look to Cain and his mincha, and Cain was very wroth, and his face fell. So maybe we'll bring a mincha, but maybe Yehovah will not regard it. Yehovah said to Cain, why are you wroth? Why is your face fallen? If you do well, is there not acceptance? If you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you should master it. So Cain's offering could have been 50 times bigger than Abel's offering, but it wasn't what Yehovah had asked for. He looked to Abel and to his offering because it was right. So we need to understand that we can bring a mincha to Yehovah that is not acceptable. Ecclesiastes 5:1 says, guard your steps when you go to the house of Elohim. Draw near to Shema rather than to give the sacrifice of fools. Listen, hearken, and obey to what he says. Be careful when you go up to the temple. Give what he's asked for. Don't give the sacrifice of fools, for they do not know that they do evil. Okay, it's something that is probably present in all of us, this thinking that we can give Yehovah something better than he's asked for. Surely Yehovah likes this. Surely this would be a big thing to give to Yehovah. That sort of thinking makes sense to us coming from a worldly perspective. Draw near rather to Shema, to hearken, to obey, rather than to give the sacrifice of fools. All a man's ways are right in his own eyes, but Yehovah weighs the hearts. To do righteousness and justice is more acceptable to Yehovah than a sacrifice. Hearken. And we imposed commands on ourselves to give from ourselves yearly 1/3 of a shekel for the service of the house of our Elohim, for the showbread, for the continual grain offering, the continual burnt offering. So when a burnt offering was given, a grain offering was given with it, of the Shabbats, of the Chodashim, for the appointed times, for the set-apart offerings, for the sin offerings to make atonement for Yisrael, for all the work of the house of our Elohim. So they gave these things which were for the service in the house of Elohim. Okay? What they didn't do at this point is say, well, we've given a load of stuff that we would usually give in our tithe, so we will give less of a tithe. We cast lots among the priests and the Levites for the people for bringing the wood offering into the house of our Elohim, according to our fathers' houses, at the appointed times, year by year, to burn on the altar of Yehovah our Elohim, as is written in the Torah, and to bring the first fruits of our soil, the first fruit of all trees, year by year to the house of Yehovah. Also to bring the firstborn of our sons, our livestock, as it is written in the Torah, the firstlings of our herds and our flocks, to the house of our Elohim, to the priests attending in the house of our Elohim, and that we should bring the first fruits of our dough and our terumah, and the fruit from all kinds of trees, of new wine and of oil. So all those extra things that they imposed on themselves to bring, everything that was brought to the priests, and the tithes of the land to the Levites. Okay, that's a separate thing. As I say, people are very easily minded to things that make sense to them. But we have to be careful. We need to draw near to Yehovah to obey what he says, not to bring a huge sacrifice, the sacrifice of fools. So, important things for us to understand about tithing. One's tithe is money that is due to Yehovah, not money that is due to any Levite, teacher, or ministry. Okay, as long as you're giving it to a Levite, you can give it to anyone. It's not due to the Levite. It was to be given to the Levites in lieu of it being given to Yehovah, though it's due to Yehovah. One's tithe is not any money given to a teacher or ministry. That is, however, a mincha. So any money that you give, you don't say, I'm giving a tithe. Okay, that's not the correct words to use. You're giving a mincha, giving an offering. Okay, tithes are separate. One's tithe is not money given to the needy. But that is, however, a mincha. All of these things are minchas. When we use material goods for Yehovah's purposes, that is a mincha. One's tithe is specifically 10% of one's increase. One's tithe is money taken before one spends of one's increase. Okay, so you are increased by something. A tithe is a 10% of your increase. You don't say, okay, well, I'll give a tithe, but after I've spent on this, after I've spent on that, after I've spent on the other. And you might think that sounds ridiculous, but I've had multiple people write emails to me to say, is it okay to give a tithe after I've spent on this project that I'm doing or that project? Because, you know, I'm not really increased by it, am I, if I've spent of the money that I got? That's not really being increased by it. One's tithe must be spent of to eat before Yehovah at the 3 feasts. Okay, so if you take your tithe to give him money, you are required to eat of and rejoice before Yehovah. You're required to do that by the Torah. In the 3rd year of tithing, one's tithe must not only be given to the Levite, but also to the orphan, stranger, and widow. And similarly, it's not only to be given to the orphan, stranger, and widow, but also to the Levite. And it's not the poor tithe. You'll hear people use this phrase. It's an incorrect phrase. It's just maybe an assumption. When you read about those groups of people, you think of them as the poor. And perhaps they were poor. They were certainly vulnerable. Malachi 3, 1-12 is something that we need to bear in mind. This is about the return of Yeshua and how he finds his people and how he sees his people when he returns. Okay, so quite possibly this is going to be something directly for us if Yeshua returns in our days. See, I am sending my messenger, and he shall prepare the way before me. Then suddenly the master you are seeking comes to his temple, even the messenger of the covenant in whom you delight. See, he is coming, said Yehovah. And who is able to bear the day of his coming? Who is able to stand when he appears? For he is like the fire of a refiner and the soap of a launderer. And he shall sit as a refiner and a cleanser of silver, and he shall cleanse the sons of Levi and refine them as gold and silver. And they shall belong to Yehovah, bringing near, synonymous word with karav, to draw near, and mincha, in righteousness. Okay, so Yeshua's going to return, and mincha, in righteousness, shall be brought. Then shall the mincha of Yehudah and Yerushalayim be pleasant to Yehovah, as in the days of old, as in former years, when Yeshua returns. And I shall draw near to you for judgment, and I shall be a swift witness against the practices of witchcraft, against adulterers, against them that swear to falsehood, against those who oppress the wage earner in his wages, the widows and the fatherless, and those who turn away as sojourner and do not fear me, said Yehovah Sabaoth. Okay, so within that we have examples of mincha being given. You turn away a sojourner, you don't give to the sojourner, and you say, oh, I wish that I could. And you've got 2 of something that you could give to them. Yehovah says, I will draw near to you for judgment. The word's mishpat, it's justice. Draw near to you for justice. For I am Yehovah, I shall not change, and you, O sons of Yaakov, shall not come to an end. So his standards are the same as they were in days of old, as they are now. From the days of your fathers you have turned aside from my laws and did not guard them. Turn back to me, and I shall turn back to you, said Yehovah Zebaot. But you said, in what shall we turn back? This is talking about the state of his people preceding his return and how he will deal with them when he does return. They say to him, what do we need to repent over? Would a man rob Elohim? Yet you are robbing me. But you said, then what if we robbed you in the tithe and in the offering? Okay, so again, this is directly talking about the people before he returns. Potentially it's talking about us as those direct people. It's certainly talking about the state of his people and their attitudes towards him before he returns, which does pertain to us. You have cursed me with a curse. You are robbing me, this nation, all of it. Bring all the tithes into the storehouse and let there be food in my house. Please prove me in this, said Yehovah Zebaot. Again, whether I do not open for you the windows of the heavens and shall pour out for you boundless blessing. And I shall rebuke the devourer for you so that it does not destroy the fruit of your ground, nor does the vine fail to bear fruit for you in the field, said Yehovah Zebaot. And all nations shall call you blessed, for you shall be a land of delight, said Yehovah Zebaot. So before he returns, his people are in a situation where they're not paying a tithe to him. Okay, that should be striking to us. And he says to those people, to us, you are robbing me. Okay, thankfully, I don't think this applies to the people who are here. People who are here have been taught on this previously. Okay, but this does apply to his people. And this is something you see it. If you're on Facebook in any Torah groups, or if you're online in any Torah groups, you'll see it over and over again, this teaching. The tithe does not apply for today. The tithe does not apply for today. It's the one part of the Torah keepers don't keep, where it's the one part of the Torah that the Christians do keep. So Genesis 32 verse 7, this is what's at the crux of this matter. Yaakov was greatly afraid and distressed. He'd been told, go to meet with Esav. He sees that there are 400 men with Esav, and he's greatly afraid and he's distressed to go and do what Yehovah said for him to do. Yeshua, when he knew what he had to do, says he began to be grieved and deeply distressed. These things are natural, but these things are necessary for our our faith to be tested and proven before Yehovah. So if you're watching this and you feel that this is something that you're fearful of doing, know that that is inherent in the tests that Yehovah sends your way. Maybe you're obedient in everything else, but in that one thing, it distresses you or it grieves you to think of doing it. 1 Peter 5 verse 8 says, be sober, watch, because your adversary, the devil, walks about as a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. He's the tempter. He's the tester. He goes about with these tests by which you will feel distressed, fearful. He goes about with these things. But it's not okay to just fail them and to say, oh, sorry, I was afraid to do that. I didn't trust you. He's seeking to do that in order to devour you. This is important. Luke 18 verse 24, let's remember when Yeshua saw that he became intensely sad, he said how hard it is for those who have riches to enter into the kingdom of Elohim. So if this makes you sad or grieved or distressed to the point where you don't want to do it, it will be difficult for you to enter into the kingdom of Elohim. You're being tested. The adversary walks around like a roaring lion to test you in order to devour you. This is important stuff. Shall we pray? Father, I thank you that you've given us the opportunity to give things to you. That we have the opportunity to bless other people, and that you've promised us that in doing so we will be blessed and that we will receive from you. We thank you for your ways, that walking in them is such an honor. I ask you, Father, that you would you draw near to us, and that if there are people who are listening to this, who are hearing this for the first time, that you minister to them, and that you would comfort them in their fear and in their distress or whatever they're going through. And that you would you'd assure them that they have that opportunity to repent before you, and that you will you'll accept them. Thank you that you chastise us when we're walking in a way that's not pleasing to you. And thank you that you've given us all the opportunity to be your servants and to do what's pleasing in your sight. Thank you, Father.